Good evening.
Chris is turned it on.
I think we are live. I'm Marty Irwin. We are together to have an informational discussion regarding the new municipal center. And I have just a very short bit of introduction, and then it will be an opportunity for questions and answers. We have only 1 hour tonight, so my comments will be brief so we can get to your questions. If you wish to speak, please come to the lectern and be close to the microphone so folks, especially at home, can hear you. Give your name, and please tell me whether you live in the village or the town so we can understand the thoughts of both groups of residents. My email address is up here. I'd like to hear from you about your thoughts, so please feel free to email me. We all need to be paying attention as whatever approach is taken to address the town residents' needs for a home where we can conduct our business, except if we continue to use the temporary trailers on a more permanent basis. There will be impacts on our property taxes. We are close to having meaningful financial information to share, and we will do so at our next informational session. Since what we are doing remains a work in progress, things will continue to change. Since our last information session, the architect has continued his meetings with employees, department heads, and the administration. These ongoing discussions have led to revised sketches, which are on the wall over here. The changes, the town, are primarily where the town and the village offices are. We have now come into the building, and you go generally to the right to the village, you go generally to the left to the town. It's all still on the main floor. The police and the courts remain in the same relationship to one another as they were before. The building footprint has changed a little bit. It has grown a lot. And in the process, what was initially contemplated to be a 20,000 square foot building has grown to 33,000 square feet. Our earlier input was that hard construction costs might be $300 per square foot. We are now advised to use $350 per square foot, which we'll use until a formal cost estimate is provided by the architect at the end of the schematic design phase. That's the phase that we're in now, the first phase in the overall design process. But please note that there are many other costs than just the construction. So the total cost isn't simply 33,000 square feet times $350 per square foot. There remain legal agreements which are not yet negotiated to a completion, and as Tim, Mayor Rogers reported in Terrence's article in the paper today, those include an intermunicipal agreement between the town and village, lease agreements between each of the town and village, and the bylaws of the LDC. I'd like to make one other comment that is in reference to today's newspaper article titled, captioned "Close to Completion." In that, on the other hand, Terrence writes, village trustee Don Kerr noted that the community center was not built to particularly high standards. I need to correct that. That's an incorrect statement. This building is a wood frame construction building built to commercial standards. That's a higher standard than our home. And my home, I'm very happy to live in, and I don't feel it was built to particularly low standards. It was built to residential code standards. This building that we're in right now is of a higher quality standard than that. At this point, unless there are any other comments that any of the town or village board members wish to make, I'd like to open it up to questions.
I would just like to politely state that people of goodwill can agree to disagree.
I also thought, Don, when you were making that point, it wasn't so much that you were saying that this building is made of any sort of lower quality, but just that the thinking is a new municipal building would be built of a different and higher quality versus this. It was really just a contrast, not an attempt to put down the quality of this building. Am I correct? Or?
I think I work with that, sure. Yes, absolutely.
Any other comments from among those of us up here?
I just wonder, I guess I'm going to ask for clarification then. So Don, what are you basing it on that you feel this is not a well-built building? I just want to know what his basis is on. Well, he's going to answer.
Yeah. This building was built as a commitment by a party who did not plan to have an ongoing relationship with the building, occupy the building, use the building. And I think there has been a general sense that I am trying to convey, a general sense among the community that it was not necessarily built as a 50 or 100-year building. And I think our new municipal building, we are looking at building for a 50, 100-year window. This building's been around for a while already. I don't know whether it was built as a 50 or 100-year building, and I just don't think they're equal in their quality.
I would say, because I was here when it was built, and now that is, just saying, it's factually incorrect. This building, and today we had members that are even here in the audience in it. We had people, Marty was even in it today with the seniors that have been using it on the onset. We have had no structural deficits. We've had no mechanical deficits. This building, it's funny, the people that built my house, they also built it without ever planning to live in it. And to Marty's point, I'm very satisfied with it. So again, I'm sorry you see this as a building that is not constructed to standards, but we have not had difficulties with it, and it is a very stable building. The roof, I would imagine, does not have a 50-year lifespan, but the rest of the structure, I certainly expect it to be here for 50 or more years. I just want to get that clear. I'm just confused.
I think that's great. We have some questions from the audience. I think we only have 45 minutes left. I think we should move on from the past and talk about the future, right? We have a new building, so let's get some public comment in here and talk about this. Is why we're here, to listen to the people, not for them to listen to us. If there's no more questions for us, and if you have questions, we can still talk about that, but let's kind of move on. And a question from the back.
Michael, you're going to need to take the microphone from here back over to there.
Michael Zeeler, New Paltz, village and town, actually, just to be clear. So I'm curious about what your plans are for this building in terms of heating and cooling. Is there hope to sort of meet a LEED standard? Are you going to use anything other than conventional fossil fuel heating and cooling? And in that same regard, in terms of basic building construction insulation, are you going to be doing anything other than the usual construction materials?
See, first question, Michael, you were asking about heating and cooling. We are going to set as our design standard the same standard that NYSERDA uses for its deep energy savings standard. If you ask me to quantify that, I'm not an engineer, I can't do it. If you ask me to cite the ASHRAE section that it refers to, I can't do that either, but that's what the standard is. What was your other question, Michael?
And so we're trying to get some grants from NYSERDA as well to help offset the additional cost that would be associated with that. I think Tim or Marty might know the exact number, but we're trying to make the building as efficient as possible. We're hoping to get that done with some grants from NYSERDA.
So
NYSERDA has indicated that the grants might be in the range of $50,000 to $60,000, and that their technical assistance will be confirming the calculations that are done by our architects team. You also asked me about heating and cooling and what a carbon footprint might
basically
look like.
Right.
Our plan is to use geothermal heat pumps, and the equipment would be powered by photovoltaic panels mounted on the building.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Are there other comments?
Already.
We're going to build it better than that.
There's a lot on the floor, too.
Last time I spoke and you were talking about this facility, I said that it was important to notify the public and have them aware, and I'm very much disappointed with the number of people here tonight, and I can only attest that it must have not been advertised widely of this meeting, et cetera. I had an opportunity to look at the documents that you're working on, and I realized that since I looked at it, there may have been additional changes. However, I looked at those and had some concepts that I would want to share with you tonight. The revised concepts in the present document is more complete, and I appreciate some of my concepts were proposed in the latest revision. There are still areas of the version I reviewed from last year's proposal that I feel still needs additional changes. The original concept I expressed was it had to be a complete document, consider all possible future changes, and fair to all taxpayers of this community, whether they live in the village or the town, should be the prime objective of both boards. In reading the documents, I came to the obvious conclusion that the board of the LDC has a tremendous ongoing responsibility. Not only are they responsible for the construction of the new facility, but also the ongoing maintenance of the grounds and buildings. They need an ongoing operating budget that includes expenses for attorneys, part-time secretary treasurer, funds for a yearly audit, and at least a part-time facilities manager. In recognizing this, you need to define when budgets are required and also how you're going to handle unanticipated overruns, like a year when we get twice as much snow than normal. Now for the specific recommendations for changes to the dockage I was privileged to review, and some may have already been changed. I definitely concur that the voting members should consist of all the elected town and village members. Section number 9B, I don't believe a member should be allowed to appoint a proxy. If they're not there, too bad, but I don't approve a proxy voted for this important position. Directors of the LDC should be for a specific term, and they've removed for cause, those causes should be defined not just by the political makeup of the town or village, when the political makeup of the town or village board changed. Minutes of all LDC minutes should be made public within 2 weeks after the LDC meeting of the village and town websites. Loans initiated by the LDC directors must be approved by the members, and ditto for investments. There's a need for a yearly budget to be submitted by the LDC for action by the town and village boards, identifying what needed when approved by members and how modifications are handled. In regards to the lease agreement, the LDC must obtain property and liability insurance, also naming the town and village as co-insured. I'm not sure that was clear in the document. I do not support the transfer of the entire town property to the LDC. The community center should be excluded. If not, this will be a contentious issue, as we saw tonight, between all future town and village boards. And what happens when the property is returned to the town and village when the bond is paid off? I understand there's been some consideration for just transferring only the area where the village municipal center is to be built. I support this, leaving the rest of the property, including snow plowing and other regular maintenance, the responsibility of the town. This can be balanced by the village being responsible for maintenance of the area of parking in Moriello. Though major repairs, resurfacing should be on a 50-50 for the area in Moriello, and the major repair of the town land parking to be a percentage of the original work, which was considered to be as part of the initial municipal building construction. I am pleased that you have considered the impacts of possible elimination of the town and our village. I think the document should specifically state that the remaining entity or new entity shall assume the financial responsibility. It's kind of nebulous. The agreement should state that the landlord, upon 24 hours notice, has the right to inspect any portion of the building. And by landlord, I mean the LDC. I don't believe that the utilities, water, sewer, electric, heat, and possibly phone service can be paid by the tenants. If separate phone systems, the tenants could each pay, and probably is the best solution. However, since the town police occupy the facility 24/7, I think the percentage for payment by town should be higher than for other costs. I put 10 to 15% higher, but maybe that's inappropriate. That should be somehow measured, I don't know. And then maybe changed after you get some experience. I've already stated the community center should not be part of this project. However, if it is, the village must assume their financial responsibilities for all the property and pay the town a percentage of the value. In this case, the village should pay their fair share plus all upkeep. The proposal of the village and the town sharing the common space 50-50 is not practical unless this space excludes that which is obviously almost entirely by the village or the town. For example, the police occupy almost all one floor, then there is common space to be paid 50-50 by both does not seem correct. An area which can access normally by the public is common space. The final percentages should wait until the design is complete and good judgment should prevail. There is no identification in the documents to where the facility, when the facility would be returned to the town and village. I believe the understanding was that it would be returned when the village bond, when the bond was paid off, but it's not mentioned. There is a mention in the document about the plans to market the present village site. I question whether this should be part of these documents. I agree that if it is to be addressed, it should be in a separate document. The present village site west of the Peace Park and the road is about 2 acres, and the town property in this area about 0.21 acres. This means that if sold for the net cost of $1 million, that the town would receive slightly under $100,000, but that's required additional work to finalize that information. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave, you brought up a lot of points, but just to go through a few of them that I picked up that the executive committee did talk about. We did evaluate the idea of proxy voting, if that's something we wanted to do, and I believe the general consensus was that's not a route we wanted to go down. The removal of members were talked about. The minutes being posted online is another area, too, that we said was something that we thought was an absolute must, too. And I think there were a few other things, but that's what I got down. Yeah, we did say that, exactly. So just wanted to answer some of those quickly for you.
And also, Dave, I do appreciate too, is it's kind of like budget meetings, and we are always surprised the lack of turnout, but I will guarantee you, I know Marty and Dan have worked very hard on just setting up this meeting, and I can speak for them. There will be, I think Dan and Marty are both in the stage where they're getting the documents together, and we will see multiple more of these meetings. This is just the first of many, so.
What we did, Dave, to advertise it apparently was not sufficient because there aren't more people here. It's on our website. In fact, there seems to maybe have been some confusion as to what time the meeting was starting, whether it was 6 or 6:30. And we did put an ad, a small display ad in the paper.
Today?
No, the one that came out last week. I believe we got it in before we went to Albany. But that's okay. It's the feedback is good, Dave, because they're saying it wasn't sufficient.
Yeah,
So we'll have to do something more noticeable.
Our last meeting that we did, too, appeared in the Daily Freeman and the Times-Herald Record, and was mentioned in the New Paltz Times, too, in an article, and we got about the same turnout. You know, but we're going to keep doing them. We're going to hope that we're getting more people engaged. I know Don's here. When we were doing the middle school project, we had the same problem, too. And I remember once we hit a certain stage in the project, we had 100 people at a meeting, and they said, well, why didn't we know about this sooner? So that I think happens with things like that.
We're
Yeah.
open to suggestions as well, so any.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't know all the answers. If anyone has any ideas for more engagement, we welcome them.
I can just mention that a mention in an article is really not sufficient for public notice. So like, you know,
Oh, I agree.
when
Yeah.
you put a notice out, town board, special town board meeting, you know, it's noticed in the paper on the first 1, 2, or 3 pages of the local paper, not the Times Herald Record, not the.
No, I know. We did that for this one. I was just letting you know that we did, and we should have done more in the first one, but even with that other additional outreach too, we got the same general turnout.
And I'm sorry to report, just so the boards know, this meeting is not going out live
Yeah.
on Channel 23.
Just found
They're
out
working
too.
on the back corner right now.
All right, good, we have to behave ourselves.
That's the way it goes.
Fran, do you want to use the mic?
Please, if you have a question or comment, please come up, tell us your name and town or village resident, and
Nope.
it's the only way everybody at home can hear.
Fran Wishnick, New Paltz. So just because you asked for suggestions about publicity, I think it's always good to say what questions are going to be answered at a meeting. You know, just saying the municipal building has some interest, but when people understand that, for example, you're going to go over the layout, you're going to go over the financing, you know, just be specific, and that will help people to understand if they want to come.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, Fran.
Thanks, Fran.
And one suggestion I'd make, there's a bulletin board on Channel 23, and based on, I've already got 2 texts saying we're not going out live. So people do watch that, so that might be another way to publicize these things in the future.
Absolutely. Josh, you want to come up and use mic?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to talk about the questions I was going to ask, I thought I could ask them during public input, but on this particular thing, unless I missed it, I was going to say something similar to what Don said, except different. Because it's such an important project, and it's an info thing. Because on the bulletin board, you know, when it comes on and it shows town meetings and all that, you know, people get blurred on that. But if this is so important, and we have Channel 23, you could put a full-page thing that'll come up when the ads come up saying, public info, information, the date and the time. I think you'll hit more people with that than you will the newspapers or any of the other things that you've done.
I think
really
that's
believe
a
that.
great idea. And
Because I know people watch the meetings, so they must
Yeah.
be watching the stuff that comes on in between.
Don, since you have I don't mean to delegate this to you, but since you do have that relationship with public access, would you mind making that request?
You can yell in the back of the room with the public access.
Or yell at the back of the
Yeah,
room?
yeah, I'll take care of that. Sure.
Okay, great, thanks.
I mean, I have some
Thanks,
other
Don.
things. I didn't know if I should wait.
Good.
Go. Would you rather I do
If it's
now
relative to
than-
this
than-
project, why don't you do it now?
Half an hour.
Yeah,
I'll help you kill some time. I have a few-
sounds good.
I'll be a little bit all over the place, bear with me, and try to just catch what I'm asking. So, of course, as you all know, because I've said it several times before, that I think that, that because it's a community government center that we're building, that this building should be included in the project. I also think that if you are going to do the LDC, of course, that the cost of demolition and the architect that we've already put out $50,000 for should be included and paid back to the town, so we're all splitting it evenly down the road. And of course, the real value of the community center should also be paid back. Now, I checked, and we're not up to date on this, but I looked at the records on the value of this piece of property, the assessed value. And it's not correct because I guess they updated in March, and since the building has been sort of out of the picture, we haven't redone it. But I know that for the last 4 years, the land has been assessed at $114,000. The total assessed value has been $1,322,400. So when you take that $114,000 away from that, that still leaves you a pretty large chunk of money. And even for the last 4 years of the prime that that building has been in, that leads me to believe that this building must have a value of about $350,000, $400,000 at least, because it is built to certain construction standards, as was stated. It's got a sprinkler system in it and all that. So I do think that I think that whether it's required by an LDC or not, I really think that you guys have to get a real appraisal of what everything is, so we really know what we're talking about. And I don't think that's been done yet, as far as I know. When you're doing the intermunicipal agreement and the LDC, there are certain things that I think need to be crystal clear in that. For instance, the town owns, I believe, 0.21 acres of the village property. You guys may know this better than me, I don't know that.
7%
7%.
of the 3-acre parcel.
So okay, and when you sell that parcel, will we be getting 7% of that value or more? What will the town be getting out of the sale of that parcel when the village
That
sells?
seems fair.
Well, I think it should be more maybe, unless we do everything evenly here. So, for instance, I'm saying because the town is putting in the land and possibly this building and everything, If they get reimbursed for that, then that's that, and then we should just get the 7% of whatever.
You mean
that-
the town of New Paltz residents?
Yeah, we're separate. Here's the thing. When you talk about residents, I think
The
it
town of
can.
New Paltz residents, who include the
Or-
village
Yes,
residents?
yes, and you
Right.
confuse the issue when you say it like that, and that's.
No,
what-
I
what
don't.
can
Actually, I clarify the issue.
Well, I want to clarify what I have to say. When you say that, you say it as residents, but the reality is we operate as two different governments, and the money that comes back to those governments individually. Minus 7%,
Right, there's an
minus
A fund.
7%, you will get all the money that comes out of the village property. Will go back into village government. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And here,
And what is the purpose of the B fund? The purpose of the B fund
But
is
this
to
is
pay
all-
for things that the village is paying for, so you're not paying for things twice. So we have a B fund and an A fund
well,
in the
this
town.
building is in the A fund, right? This building is in the town A fund.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just want to state it, and then you can say what you think. So this building is in the A fund. And if we bought a piece of property that we decided to go in on, and it wasn't owned by the town, we would share all the expenses of acquiring the property, of cleaning it up, and doing whatever we had to do. And this shouldn't be any different because the town owns the land. Because we're dealing government to government, not people to people, as you keep trying to put it. The governments each have a budget to work with, and the town budget is pretty big. So any penny, anything that's an asset to this town should be recuperated by the town for the town. Just like anything that's a village asset that you really own, you should get all the money for that. You know, if we own 7%, we should get the 7%. That's my only point. I'll leave it at that. I want to move on to some other stuff related to the project, but just something to think about. In the IME, when you get around to doing things, I think there should be some real specifics. You know, Dan, when I hear you say, well, we talked about it, by the time we get to the documents, it's got to be really spelled out. So for instance, when you talk about common space, you have to be really specific and detailed when you spell that out. When you're doing a contract like that, we're not going to be trying to settle it or fight over. I don't want to be fighting over anything 5 years from now, 10. You guys really have to have everything laid out. So, I'll ask you guys a question. What is the current projected cost of this project right now, as you guys have it figured to this point? I have an idea of what that number is. Should I state it, or would you guys like to state what you think it is at this
The
point?
project is a work in progress. We don't have,
I'm talking about hard cost, not soft cost. I just want to know what you think the
but
hard.
even the hard cost is a work in project. So what we presented tonight was a concept. So no one's, you know,
right.
Marty updated that it's probably prudent to use $350 a square foot and not 300.
Well, here's what I think. The last
Okay,
that.
well, you asked me a question.
Right.
So the
Well, I
the
wanted
point
to
that I'm
see if you
making
could
is
give me a
that the
number.
newspapers have reported on a $10 million building. We
I
are
know
not
it-
married to a $10 million project. We're not married to moving forward on any project. We are looking at a concept. We're looking at what a 30,000 square foot building might cost.
You're
We might
above
have to
30.
make it smaller. We might have to use a local development corp to own the building. You know, there are several things under consideration.
All right, let me
We're trying to
continue.
be as transparent as possible to try to have information sessions early so people are aware of what's being considered.
I'll make my point directly, as rather than ask you, I'll tell you.
I'll say this, before we do anything, we're going to look at how it affects the taxpayers.
Right,
And we're not going to just make decisions and then raise taxes to meet that. We're going to look at the final cost, and then we're going to have a discussion and be like, well, maybe we can't afford this. We need to go back and decide something that is within our budgets, right? The bottom line is the amount that the taxpayers can afford and are willing to pay is driving this, we're not driving this.
Well, no, you're not, but here's the question. So, I believe right now that the building is probably up to about 33,000 square feet, and I believe that the hard cost is probably close to 16 million. When last Carol, Dave, and I were involved, we were at 10 million, but now I believe the real number is closer to 16 million, and that's just hard cost. I don't even have an idea what the soft costs are. Now, so I have two questions. What would the cost, and I don't believe you guys have.
Can you
the
help me with the arithmetic? How do you get to 16 million? I'm just curious.
Well, there's just so much more building that.
Right,
you
so
can
how many
create.
square feet and what per square foot estimate are
I'm
you
guessing.
using?
I said I'm guessing. If you want to correct me, because you have an exact number.
But you're throwing numbers out, and it's really important.
Tell me I'm wrong.
It would not be unreasonable to use 33,000 square feet at $350 per square foot. That number is from Joe Hurwitz, the architect, the $350 a square foot. If you multiply that out, it's $11,550.
11 million.
$11,550,000, excuse me. And that represents the hard construction costs.
Right, but
exclusive of any
that's
other
not
costs.
locked in yet either.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Josh, I'd also like to say, you were involved in this building before I was involved in this building. And when I came on, people were talking about $10 million, right? And
Well, I'm going to make my point about why I'm asking about the numbers. I'm leading up to
And
something.
so, as far as I'm concerned, 10 million isn't even on the table. We need to look at the building and decide what we can afford as a community. So I'm not even willing to say that we're going to spend 10 million, never mind 16 million. These, like Tim said, these numbers are in flux. Nothing is written in stone. This is a concept where we want the public's input, but we're not married to any of this.
Well, let me explain something to you. When we came to a conclusion 8 years ago and wanted to build the town and the police and the court, we were at 10 million then. And that was on a bigger piece of land and acquiring the land and all that. And now, when you talk about what we can afford and not afford, everything isn't a long-term thing. We're looking to build a building that's a 75 to 100-year building. And when you say, well, can we afford 10 million? We just had a school bond go through for 52 million that people thought they couldn't afford, but it passed. The people passed it.
We need to look at the numbers.
But the way that this process goes, the people won't have an input on the project going, because if you do it in an LDC, you bypass certain rules. So I want to know that I think
Whether we use an LDC as the owner of this building has nothing to do with
well, there's certain
whether there's a
rules that
referendum or not.
Well, I don't know. There are other rules that you don't have to go by. But here's my question. I would like you guys to consider and at least tell the public what the cost of the project would be with just police, town, and court. And I would also like to know what the cost of the project would be with just town, which is how this originally started, because we were in desperate need and because the cost of doing business out where you guys are now is not going to be good for this community either. So I think when you're trying to tell the public what you're willing to do, the public should have a right to know what the cost of the project would be under those three different scenarios. The one we're doing now, the one without the village, and the one without the police and court, because of the size of the footprint, and it's growing and growing and growing. I've seen it grow a lot, we've seen it grow a lot since we were involved with it. Another question I have is, in talking about, when I read up on LDCs, of course, they always talk about that the powers of the help LDCs accomplish their goals always leave open the potential for abuse. An analysis suggests that the need for full and public disclosure of them ensure the government, to ensure that government officials who often retain the power to appoint LDC board members do not use them to reward friends and political allies. So I'd like you at some point to just explain to us how you will ensure that ends.
Can you repeat
I can respond to that now.
Okay.
I have no friends.
I'm asking how, I'm asking how you can ensure that, because there seems to be, in past performances of other LDCs, that's come up a lot, so.
It's difficult to guarantee outcomes, but what has been proposed.
Well, to the best of your abilities.
Is that there
of course.
would be 5 members to the LDC Board of Directors. 5 people, excuse me, because I don't want to use members, it's another term. 5 people on the Board of Directors. 2 of them would be appointed by the town, 2 would be appointed by the village, and the 5th one would be appointed upon mutual agreement of the town and the village. Each of the town and the village, one of their 2 appointees would be an elected member, and the other would be as they felt was best to augment the Board of Directors' strengths and skill sets. There are 2 members, and the members are basically the town and the village, although that is not yet a finalized definition, whether it's one person appointed by each of the town and the village as the member, or whether it is collectively each of the 2 boards. The terms, that is not yet negotiated to where we have all come to a consensus on it, but we're working on that, and we'll get there.
And also, I just want to add too, I mean, what we literally did, I'm not going to even pretend that we came up with it on our own. We took the New York State Comptroller's report on LDCs, which was very critical of LDCs, and we implemented maybe everything they suggested. I don't have it in front of me, but almost everything they suggested, we implemented in our bylaws as.
No, I know
good
that. You
government
told that
practice.
to me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have you
Yeah,
state it
absolutely.
again in a more public forum. That's all.
Sure,
That's why I
yeah.
asked the question. And again, LDCs have the special powers to acquire property from a municipality without appraisal or bidding, and then under no obligation to participate in a competitive bidding process to comply with procurement. So if a local body decides to sell a lease of property to them for $1 or something, you could do that. But I would come back to that the town owes its taxpayers before you give it to them, I think you owe it to the taxpayers to get it into an agreement to protect, again, the value of the land that we are putting into the project and this building. And again, I think it should all be as one, because when you use the word, this is a community government center, we're trying to tighten things. I don't think we should throw this building out because it's already part of the community and being very much used by the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh. Are there other comments?
I'm Carol Roper, and I'm a resident of the town, and on the building committee, okay? First of all, in regard to discussion earlier about the quality of this building, there have been rumors since the day it was started that it was in terrible shape. And those rumors have persisted. Whether they're right or not, I don't know, but that isn't a new concept about this quality of this building, okay? I had two questions. The first one has been sort of answered, and that had to deal with the makeup of the LDC thing. Originally, I thought it was going to be 2 town board members, 2 village board members, and 1 layperson from the village and from the town. And my question was going to be, have those people been appointed? But now it sounds as though you've changed your whole perspective on who will be on the LDC if indeed it happens. My last question is, the second question and the last one is our committee now defunct? Have we done what we're supposed to do? Are we being outlawed? Are you guys going to need us anymore? Or are we ready to hand in our resignations and go home and watch it on television? And I think we need to know. There are 3 of the 5 of us here, and I think we need to know whether we have any input anymore. My original thought was that we would be talking to the architect and making recommendations or changes, but we haven't met for about months now, I guess, really, and we don't have. And some changes have been made, and we had nothing to do with these recommendations. So I at least know, and speaking for myself at least, I need to know whether I'm on this committee or whether I'm not, and if the committee is supposed to function as it did, or whether the LDC will take over everything. Okay? Thanks.
So Carol, just so you know, the makeup of the LDC board, when Ken Bond came to speak to the joint boards when we met at Village Hall, which is probably a little over 2 months ago, he made that initial recommendation that it only be 1 elected official, and we immediately, 1 elected official from each municipality. And we agreed with him. We thought that was a good procedure, so we've operated ever since that meeting under that assumption. Obviously, we have not formalized an LDC yet, so it could change, but I see no reason based on what we heard from Ken and what we've discussed that will change. It'll likely stay in that format. Also, when you guys had a building committee meeting about maybe 6 weeks ago, that question was asked about your role still?
It was 3 weeks ago.
You had one 3 weeks ago. There was one even prior to that, because I don't even think Anil was in office yet, where we met in that room over there, and that question was raised, and anyone can correct me if I'm not telling this correctly. I believe what we kind of came to was that we had our documents that we were working on at this point, and that we would let you know what we needed from you guys at that point. That we're not disbanding the committee, but that we wanted to go through those documents, and then we would kind of figure out that your committee's place as we continue the process.
So we're sort of nebulous right now.
Sort of, I mean, and so are we. We're still figuring out what we're doing with our documents as well. That's why we don't have anything to present tonight. We're taking our time with it, and we're continuing to review a number of the things that even came up tonight.
I guess my concern is,
Yep.
Dan,
Yep.
that in regard, there were different plans tonight from the last that we saw. Now, the question is, do we go to the architect or do you guys go to the architect? What role do we have in this? I mean, I know we're sort of in limbo right now. I agree, I understand that. But it bothers me that changes are made in the plans that we had sort of approved or had discussed, and we knew nothing about the changes, and that bothers me. I just want to put that on the record. Okay?
That I can speak to, Carol.
Yeah.
On this past Tuesday, 2 days ago, the architect brought us these revised drawings, which is the first change really since the ones that you're referring to that you all participated with. At this point, it's not a matter of any of us saying, well, we like it or we don't like it. It's a matter of us saying, is this the correct configuration? Is this the correct location for folks? And at this point, we've been guided by the architect, who was guided by input from his meetings with the department heads and representatives from each of the town and the village boards. And these drawings came out of that. They reflect space needs. When we get to what the building will look like on the outside, there'll be lots of input that we'll be seeking from the community. Just like when we were asked to opine about the design of the bridge across the Wallkill, that we wanted a truss or flat or an arch. We all had an opportunity to give our input, and there will be that opportunity again for the community to give its input. Now, how does the Municipal Space Committee fit into that process? I don't know the answer to that. There may not be a specific role for any group or committee, but rather some presentations from the architect that then the public can weigh in on.
Okay, well, I just think that if we are still in existence, even in limbo, that we should have some say and know what's going on, and I don't think that's been the case recently.
There really has been very little that has changed since the last Municipal Space Committee meeting. The designs that were up on the wall before they fell down, because I didn't use very good tape, that was a change. But again, it was a change not in direction or philosophy, it was just a change in how much space do we need now that we're learning more information. So I hope that you all don't feel that you were not brought into that discussion. It really was, well, do it analytically, what is needed. And it was an analytical process that the architect used. There was no subjectivity of us saying, I like that room that big, or it should be smaller. We did comment on it shouldn't be there, it's too big, there's not enough of them, but they were quantitative.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Well, I think it's also important to mention how the most recent changes and decisions were also driven by recommendations and suggestions by town and village staff. You know, at this point, we're looking for input from the folks who will work in the building. So that's why there have been changes made, and that's what was presented this evening.
Dave, before you speak again, Ron, were you wanting to say something? Okay, that's fine. I just didn't want to go twice without someone else going.
Rather than trying to do things serially, I think that in relationship to also doing this, the town and the village want to look at what the cost of their present operation is and what costs would be eliminated by the new building, so that when you get to a question that says this building is going to cost X and this is the projected costs that you're going to have to pay on the thing, that you have that you don't start at that point looking at, well, what monies will we not spend because we don't have trailers and we don't have that electrical cost out there and we don't have that heat cost and all the rest of the stuff. Rather than wait till that period, if you have your staff working on those other preparation costs and what they would be eliminated, I think that would be a good approach, and I hope that's being done. If it's not, I hope that proposal, that plan is working.
As we're working towards having presentation material, the present costs are being considered in how we arrive at the bottom line.
They are being developed. I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that.
What we can't do very well is to say, now we pay X for electricity, in the future, when there's a new building, we'll be paying Y, so there's a savings there. We don't know
No,
how to
but we know,
quantify
but we
that.
find out what we're paying now, okay?
Well, we know what we're paying now. I have that information
Okay,
from
fine.
Gene.
And I have that for the village as well.
Okay, good.
So-
Okay,
But
that's-
until we have some indication, which we won't have for quite some time,
Okay.
as to what the likely operating costs of the new building will be, we can't do that comparison to say, well, here's an additional savings. We can anticipate there'll be additional savings because it'll be more energy efficient, but we can't quantify that yet.
Okay, I also want to give Tim, I got this in your text, the 2.8 acres you're talking about includes Peace Park, and I don't think you really want to eliminate Peace Park.
When I say 3 acres, I'm including Peace Park. I know, but
2.8
let,
includes the Peace Park, and you probably don't want to eliminate that, right?
when I say no, when I'm talking about 3 acres, I'm talking about the town and village-owned parcel in aggregate. And when I talk about 7%, I'm talking about the town only, the town-owned portion. So when you're talking about, what was the number you used, 2.8? That's the
2.8
village
town,
owned,
okay, but
no,
that
that's the
includes Peace
village.
Park. That includes the Peace Park.
It absolutely does include
Okay,
Peace
fine.
Park.
It does include it.
Right. But you're 3 acres, 7% of 3 acres is owned by the town. I'm not talking about the actual street block and lot number. I'm
Okay,
talking
but I'm
about
just
2
saying,
parcels
the portion
in
the village
aggregate.
Would be selling would be, I'm sure they wouldn't sell the portions to Peace Park. I don't think.
And
There's
just
there's
as-
100 ways to skin the cat.
And just as we've looked at various scenarios to include the community center, not to include the community center, how to value it at $1 or at some other number, when it comes to the details of the conveyance, I'm sure there will be a similar series of discussions. Well, should each building be appraised and take the ratio of what they are, or should it be, well, this is 7% of some other number? So I'm sure there'll be different approaches that will be considered before we settle on the one to use.
Okay, so we got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that anyone who hasn't spoken yet has a chance to speak, and just to remind anyone who is going to speak, we need to be brief and wrap this up, because we have a meeting.
Ron Knapp in the town of New Paltz. Just a question, what is the current footprint of, well, let's not say current, how much space has been occupied by the town office buildings when they were here? Was the floor space? And with the village? What are those two numbers in aggregate? And what are the numbers in the new space out on Veterans, out on the drive there, when added to the village space in comparison with the total 33,000 that you're talking about?
And Ron, just so you know, it's not as simple because now we're combining courts and the police. So we're
Well,
gonna take,
well,
if
put
you
them-
take all those added together
Well, then
is-
put them all together.
And what is that about?
We have those numbers. The architect actually compiled a list of all the square footage of every single office in the current town hall configuration as well as the village hall configurations. And what we quickly realized is, for example, the village building inspector is in a teeny tiny office space, and the town building inspector is in a different sized office space. So we're very mindful of what we currently have and what we want to build, because we want to build something for the future, not build something to today's current challenged space. So it's not so much like we have X and we're looking to replicate that or build for the future. We're trying to optimize office space. So we want to create synergies where the town and village employees can work on the same floor and share space. So it's not so much about taking what we have and replicating that.
And Josh, I'll just answer your question too, just from an email I received today, is total hard and soft cost is an estimate of $16,969,433. 12.38 of that, 12.3 of that is hard cost, the rest are other soft costs and associated costs.
Okay.
So you had a number that was I would say, as accurate as the number I received today in an email.
I just want to say
Well,
something.
the email that you received today, Jeff, includes soft and hard costs
That's what I said.
to arrive at 16.
That's why I
So
said
when-
the 12 was the hard, 12.3 is the hard.
Right.
And-
But
and-
I think it's also incredibly important to say, like, these are very rough estimates. Like,
absolutely.
we're not necessarily building a $12 million building.
I
just
agree.
I just want to say something to this gentleman. 8 years ago, when we were on this project, we had to move the police. They had waited 30 years where they were in a space way too small. We had a different architect before this architect tell us how how much more space we needed. We were way under what we needed 8 years ago, and things have grown and offices are bigger. I don't think anybody's trying to just have luxurious, large things. They're trying to just have an adequate amount of space for what we need. That's why we had professionals do assessment needs as opposed to everybody here saying what they think that it should be. One last thing, it doesn't matter to me whether the committee's functional or not, because I myself and everybody else in this community can always participate as a citizen, because we do have open government in New Paltz, and I actually encourage people to pay attention and be involved in the process rather than wait for like the last meeting and scream, how come nobody told me about this 2 years from now or whatever. So I just encourage the public to stay on top of it. When we did our conclusion 8 years ago, and I'll leave you with this, Dave had warned us. He said, the longer you take, costs are going to go up for bonding and stuff, and as it is now, interest rates are going up slightly, although we'll see what happens. But of course, the cost of doing nothing is going to be even more, and it shouldn't be an option. And when you talk about what we can afford, you have to have a long-range understanding of the cost over a period of time and look to the future beyond our generation and those of us who are sitting in this room and watching. That's what a responsible government would do. So sometimes you have to spend a little more money because of the savings in the long run. And because we're trying to build an efficient building, we are going to have a lot of savings. So people should know, I know you're all working as hard to do the right thing, but we don't want to undercut ourselves either for a couple of dollars here and there. That's all. Thank you.
We can only ask people to pay so much, right? So we have to be mindful of what this building costs, and I think we all are, right? That's why these are preliminary plans.
Okay, it's 7:30, so do we want to do a quick 2-minute water break, and then we'll commence the joint meeting?
I just had a closing comment. I just want to compliment my colleagues. My very first civic committee or board I was on was a committee to look at an expansion of the New Paltz High School. It was before I was on the PTA, before I was on the Board of Education. And we were using a number. We were talking about a number of how we thought it would be this much of a project through all the meetings. And the board president at the time actually said, and was quoted in the newspaper, we think it's going to be a project of X. The next meeting, the architects came in and said, we made a mistake. It's actually going to be a project of X plus. So I'm really appreciative, and I think it's really wise not to go mentioning any hard numbers and the cautions everybody's used. These are very soft. We don't know yet, and we just don't know yet. And I think I appreciate the conservatism everyone's been using on that subject, because we don't want to misinform the public. We don't know yet, and when we know, we'll say it.
Yep, I agree. Okay. I think we're...
I move that we open the village-town joint meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I make that motion on behalf of the village?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're on.
Great. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hang on a minute. It's over here, it's in the corner.
Oh, okay.
You'll know it's there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Before we do that, I would like to request that we have a brief preliminary discussion about municipal garbage contracts.
Add
The
that to-
agenda.
Add that to the agenda?
Brief introductory discussion.
A second. All in favor? Can I do that?
Aye, sure, you have the motion be such approve the agenda.
Right, so, I move that we approve the agenda.
Second?
All in favor? Oh, any discussion, sorry?
Good. Aye.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion so carried. And so, could we start with some public comment, please? If you have any comments, please come to the microphone. If there are no comments, we'll move on. All right, so let's move on for the announcements. Are there any announcements? Anyone? Great. So we're going to have an update about the comprehensive master plan. So the chairs, Fran Wishnick and Bill Murray, I think, and just Fran is here, right? So if we could get a mic.
Hey, do you want to take a seat over here, maybe? And sit with us?
It's for the TV, though.
Fran Wishnick, and so I'm chairing the Master Plan Steering Committee with Bill Murray as co-chair. And we've had several meetings so far, very introductory type meetings. The goals of the Master Plan Steering Committee are to eventually help to develop a comprehensive plan for both the town and the village. A community needs a guide or blueprint to make sure that its land use laws and capital improvement plans and public facilities all work together. And also to try to give clear signals to developers about what we want. So that's what a general comprehensive plan does. We are especially talking in our committee about what kind of product we want to see at the end, which doesn't mean we're talking about the conclusions, whether it be, in advocating one particular thing over another, but we want to understand what we're looking for as a product, so we do the best that we can to achieve that. And some of the actions in prior plans have really not been clearly defined or maybe even doable. And so one of my examples that I like to think about as one that either has not been clearly defined or isn't doable is that in the 2010 draft town plan, it called for developing a matrix or checklist to help the planning board determine if the community character was being met by a particular proposal. I think that's very, very vague, and there were no examples given of how that would work in any particular area. So then you start out with what is community character and how would you develop a checklist? And so what we want is we want to have actions that we can actually accomplish, and to leave out the things that we either don't understand, that are not clearly defined, or maybe aren't doable. Willing to have a stretch, in other words, not everything has to be easy, but they have to be achievable and understood by the community. We are trying to incorporate and synthesize all studies that have been done or are in process, and actually I'm interested in this joint proposal for a tree inventory grant, because that also can become part of our work. So I'd like the committee to be kept informed about any work that you're doing that relates to land use in both the town and the village. I think we're fairly informed. Dave Gilmore has helped us a lot in developing a list of studies that have been done. He's the first to say it's not complete, but it looks complete to us. So what we're trying to do as a committee, this is where we are. We know that we have to develop an RFP that would then go to you guys to to approve and to send out an RFP to hire a consultant. When we would get responses to the RFP, we would interview the consultants based on a scoring sheet that we would develop. Eventually, we would recommend a consultant, but again, it would be advisory. And then, once a consultant is hired, we would work with the consultant over a period of time to develop the comprehensive plan. Now, timing. At our next meeting, which is February 2nd, we're going to have Dennis Doyle, Director of County Planning, there. And I think I'm going to read you the two questions that I've developed so far for Dennis to address, because maybe it'll give you some idea of where we are. The questions are, what decisions should the committee make before developing an RFP? For example, the committee has seen detailed RFPs describing each section of the planning consultant's report, what they want, section by section. The committee has also reviewed a brief RFP that is open-ended and not directive, based on the desire to get the most useful New Paltz updated comprehensive plan. What is your opinion? So we're asking that of Dennis Doyle. And the second one has to do with getting public opinion and outreach. So the second question is, the committee will be reviewing a State of Maine publication dealing with establishing a community vision. What is your opinion of this type of approach? With considerable effort on forming a vision for New Paltz, a small town of contrast, in the end, would spending the time on the vision as outlined in that report yield results that New Paltz can turn into actionable items? That should give you some sense of where we are. We're not ready to hand an RFP to you. We probably won't be ready for, I think, a few months, but we also know that we need to act. So hopefully that fits in with your time frame and your understanding of the process. Do you have any questions?
Thanks.
Thanks, Fran. Fran, that's actually the second time tonight that public outreach has come up, you know, the first being in the municipal, combined municipal center meeting. So I think that's something that we should, as a respective board, should look to improve in the future. I think social media might be a good resource for that. I know some people utilize it more heavily than others. But, if you have any suggestions on how better to outreach, please forward those. And that goes for anybody else watching at home too. I like feedback.
Actually, there's a publication that Michael Z has referred us to from the Orton Foundation, and it's called Heart and Soul. Within that, they have actual webinars on how to do social media to get public involvement in the process. And I can actually forward those links of the webinars and give you some ideas.
That would be great. Thank you.
I also wanted to take a moment to just thank Fran. I think she's doing a great job taking on the responsibility of chairing this committee. We have a lot of great folks on the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and she's taking her task very seriously and running good meetings and encouraging everyone to participate. So thanks, Fran.
So I wanted to, the next topic is this Moriello water loop discussion. And Jeff, would you be willing to give an update of that? Sure. Just, so this is just, part of the joint meetings is we're trying to keep the village board appraised of some projects that we may need some input on at some point. So I added it to this, so.
Today we had a meeting. This has been a discussion that's been going on. I think, Tim, you were around for part of it in the past. The lands of Moriello on South Putt, adding a water loop so we don't have a dead end. And if, Chris, I say anything wrong, you were there, and I'm sorry, Stacy left, so feel free to correct me. One of the issues we're having is water pressure and water volume on the eastern side of our community. And that's just because of the infrastructure is aging, and as you know, in the village, you're repairing much of your infrastructure. And in the town, to get more water, we have an opportunity now. We were blocked for many years from adding the water loop because the property was being held by Wilmerite. They had an option on that property, so we were not able to get access to it. The option ended December 31st, so now back in touch with Mike Moriello, who owns the property, along with his wife. They're the holders of it, and so now they are willing to discuss with us an easement again. What this water loop would do is it would allow us to connect to the water main coming off of the water tower on Cherry Hill, and then bring that water down to South Putt, which would then feed into the water main, which goes both to the north out to the high school, high school and the other businesses out there, and then it would also then head back into the system to the DEC and to also the new hotel, the existing hotel. And again, this would solve, we believe, some of the water volume and water pressure issues. Did I describe that correctly?
So they're at the end of the line right now, and if there's a big demand or a leak or something, we're worried that there wouldn't be enough pressure to handle everything, and this is just kind of like a booster line that goes in. And this project's been, I have a letter from 1997 where they first talked about this, and so we're hoping to do this.
So the other advantages too, and this goes back to also about 7-8 years ago when we first started the reviews of the Hampton Inn. The Hampton Inn owner was willing to give us money to upgrade the water system, knowing that it would help them also with any pressure issues, particularly when it comes to fire protection. That's really our biggest concern here, is having the pressure and the volume needed should there ever be an emergency on the eastern side of town there. And he gave us enough money that we could both get the easement on the Moriello property, and then we could also pay for the construction of it. So what we would like to ask of you, and I don't know, we'll be doing it during our portion of the meeting, is we'll be doing the resolutions to approve the engineer to draw up the specs, and then we'll also be approving for the attorney, our attorney, to be talking to Mike Moriello for the easement. What we need from you is the village, if they're interested, is we'd like to just have the permission for the interconnection up on Cherry Hill. So we would just need permission from the village to interconnect the water main to the main at the Cherry Hill tank.
And you're connecting to the Cherry Hill tank to take advantage of its pressure, right? That's what you need pressure, and we have pressure in that water tank. So that's why you need to connect a line to our water tank.
More important is the volume, other than the pressure.
The volume.
The volume of the water. We can produce the pressure.
Oh, you can?
In two fires going on, we lose the volume there, which will give you a surge, which is what pops lives. So we do, like when we've had major breaks on Huguenot Street, we've lost all of our water on South Putt. It stops until the system finally slowly catches up, and then pushes the water back up. This would alleviate, if something happened downtown, we wouldn't be without water on the top end of town.
Or the
Can you guys give Chris a microphone? I have another question for Chris.
Chris, actually, we want to move over there, and while he's moving over, the other ones, we had a leak at the DEC that went on for, I remember that a few years ago, that went on for a couple days. And during that leak period, we had issues with alarms going off for low pressure at ShopRite Plaza because their fire protection system was getting down to very low levels. So it's pressure and volume obviously are related, but what happens is the pressure drops if we don't have the volume during either a break or during an emergency.
We've had fluctuating pressure from high pressure alarms to low pressure alarms. It's not a constant. The loop.
So that's a dead end loop currently, and there's a fire hydrant across the street from the high school, correct?
Yep, it ends just after the high school.
Right.
There's one in the parking lot of the high school, and there's one more that goes down further south.
And we've learned this as a village board recently, the advantage of a water loop versus a dead end system, particularly when it comes to fire hydrants, is the risk of water hammers in a dead-end system is much greater, whereas if everything can be looped, then you're going to have a much
Which is
safer
the question
system.
of volume. You know,
Mhm.
if all of a sudden, let's just say the two hotels, everyone flushes at once, then you're taking the water out of the pipe, the volume isn't there. Typically, the pressure is, but you're losing your volume. And then that's where you produce a water hammer.
Right.
Sounds like halftime during the Super Bowl, everyone flushing at once.
And actually, and I'm sorry, you guys have any other questions, do we want to invite, I didn't realize Dave Clauser is still here, so if you have any other engineering questions. Yeah, I didn't see him either, he's hiding, so.
So we're talking about transportation, distribution, and pressure. We're not talking about any change in the actual amount of water.
No, this wouldn't change the demand, any current demand on the water. This would be going into what is existing Water District 2, 1. I apologize, 2.
This isn't about,
Water
we
District
don't
1.
need more water, we
That was just the
we
question.
want,
Ask and answer.
You need pressure and
Yeah,
volume.
just
And volume.
getting rid of the branch system and putting in loops. There was also,
Right.
we talked about the possibility of adding a spur from that line into the back end of Cherry Hill on Apple, which would, once we took out those tanks, or the one tank right there by True Value, my personal belief, that caused us a pressure problem, you know, in that area. Tying that into the back of Cherry Hill would give us, it would almost make that another loop. So we're, you know, getting rid of the branch systems as much as possible and tying everything in. Again, water hammers, better residuals, you know,
Right.
the whole package.
So
For
we
us.
end up with a much safer system for all the houses that currently have fire hydrants and our high school. We actually have a system which would be a lot more robust.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot less susceptible to the common foes that break our system down.
So I got an email from Supervisor Batez asking about an arrangement that would allow the town to access this water tank at Cherry Hill, and it would require a formal agreement between the town and the village. So I asked our attorney, Will Frank, you know, what we would need to do immediately, and he said that there would be no problem for our board or even myself just to give Will the go-ahead to begin negotiations with your attorney as you create an agreement, and then once we have an agreement, then we can bring that before our board for review. So I'm very comfortable with our board just moving ahead and giving Will a green light to begin discussing a possible agreement with your attorney, George Lithgow, who's looking at this.
I spoke to the village attorney this afternoon about this, and it turns out when they put the other water tank in 2007, they actually put a stub out and a valve for this line. So that's going to save a lot of work as far as making this connection. The village did that. That was really foresight. I was just surprised. They didn't have to do that. And they did that on the village's dime, and I think they should be reimbursed for that because it's money that the town is certainly going to save by making this connection now. It was about $13,000. The town owes the village a thank you, I'll say that.
I think a thank you is worth $13,000 myself. Does anyone, I'll even personally shake your hands for 30.
The only question I
That
have
was
to,
great.
in light of the fact that we have two trustees who aren't here, and we have discussions, if we want, are we comfortable waiving our two-meeting rule for the three of us here? We may be. I'm not saying we're not. I'm not saying anything wrong with this.
In a village meeting and not a joint meeting?
Well, we actually don't need any formal action by our board. I can informally have our village attorney to begin a discussion. We will not take any formal action that would require review of our board until we have an agreement to review.
So three of us just wink?
Well, no, not even. We're just kind of discussing. What we're doing is we're discussing that we should anticipate an agreement to review at some point in the future. It's really just a heads up about this is in the works. I mean, if you guys said, "Wow, this is an awful idea," don't give Will the green light. Then I would definitely heed your advice. But But we don't need to do anything formally as a board tonight.
And again, a good question, Don. It just, we will be forwarding to you pretty rapidly, and the reason being is we do have, a 3-story hotel is going in, and he's projected to open in April. The Hampton Inn will be open, so it does pressure out right now. If that is correct, Dave, it's pressure. It appears it will provide the pressure.
Barely.
And our concern is the volume that could become an issue, and then just because the volume issues seem to have changed since the tank was also concerned, just again out at the school, also there's a hotel next to it, so we'll be forwarding you, information from Dave very quickly. Dave's gonna, if the board approves it tonight, Dave will be getting plans out in, he said he could do it in 2 weeks, so I'm gonna hold him to that.
All right.
You said it, Dave, I'm gonna hold you to it.
I said it.
Good, you agree.
There's about 15,000 feet of dead end right now. This would make only 4,000 feet to the high school at this point. So it really is, it's a great project. It's something that we've been trying to get done for a long time. It makes a big difference at the high school especially.
Yeah, I think the idea of providing better fire safety for the high school kind of goes without saying, that that's something that we're supportive of.
Thank you.
Great. Tim, would you be interested in talking about this combination of the merger of the ENCB and the Village ECC? Or?
Right, so this is a concept where we have an environmental conservation board with town members, and then we have an environmental policy board, which used to be an environmental policy commission, that's part of village government. I have been informed previously by the former chair of the ENCB for the town that they have a very narrow mandate, and that their main focus is to look at projects, land use applications before the town planning board. And I know that the village EPC or environmental policy committee or board had been anticipating to do more of that work for land use applications before the village board, but I feel like it could be useful to have a single board across the town and the village tasked with that narrow mandate of looking at land use applications before the town planning board or the village planning board. But then I also think the broader mandate that our EPC has been using, where they were the authors of the banning of the plastic bag law and other broader environmental initiatives or broader environmental reviews, that's a very useful function. I think it would be great to have folks outside of the village as well as in the village on that type of broader mandated environmental board. So the thinking was have two separate environmental boards, one with a narrow mandate that's looking at planning board applications, and then the other with a broader mandate that's reviewing various environmental policy or reviews, kind of whatever the chair and the members of that environmental board were interested in. But just to basically restructure both of those, and I shared this with the chair of our environmental policy board, and I assured him, we're floating this idea, it's under review. We definitely want the feedback of the members of both of the existing boards, but that's the rough idea currently that's being considered.
Just quickly too, I spoke to Mike Dimitrovitz, who is an interim chair of the ENCB, and floated this idea and said mainly the same stuff, that we don't really necessarily have a plan yet, but this is kind of what we're discussing. And his initial feedback was that he did like the idea. He liked the idea of the potential of getting to review village projects as well. When Don was on the EPC, he was coming to the ENCB meetings, and we tried very hard to make those committees interconnected, and apparently an election happened where half the committee left, and that kind of hurt that relationship a bit, but it is something that we were trying to do as well, and that presently the chair is supportive of. So just wanted to give you an update.
And I think also, the timing on this might be, to Dan's point, a very good time. I have to look at town law, at the size of the members. I just concerned about, I think we're gonna have to look at our town law and restructure the members. But I think as, you know, you guys did the rezoning on 32 North, I think this is a perfect time, because as we look to our environmental board to do review for our planning board, it would be great to have village and town environmental people looking at that same project and giving comments. My concern is the size of it, though. So I think maybe you guys need to sit down, and maybe you and Neil could get together, and everyone else could get together, and I think we need to rewrite our law, though. I think the size of our ENCB is dictated in our law. Does that sound correct? It is, yeah, it's dictated by law, so we might need to go in and change the law. Because I think if we make, if we just combine the two and we take our, 7, and take your 5?
Well, my
Or are
thinking
you
was to
proposing-
continue with 2 separate boards.
Oh, and make a.
So it's like the broad mandate board and the narrow mandate board. So the narrow mandate board only looks at
applications,
planning board applications, whether it's town or village. And the broad mandate board does whatever they want to do from, they want to look at environmental policy. They want to review anything through an environmental lens. They have a very broad initiative.
Let's just make sure we're
So
looking
it's just
at
like, there are some people
yeah.
who want to look at big picture stuff and some people who want to drill down and look at planning board applications. So we want to, put people from across the town with narrow specialties or broad specialties on these respective boards.
Yeah.
I'd like to reel this in a little bit, and you just say, we would like to,
We, meaning, I'm sorry, me, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that was the point I was gonna make. I was the initial chair, founding chair of the village's environmental policy commission, and I would prefer that we have this discussion after there's been some discussion, and I know you mentioned that, you mentioned you emailed with the chair. The chair actually, the initial email the chair of the village commission sent to the mayor was to ask us not to discuss this tonight, because they would just like to have an idea of what we're discussing. It's their commission. I know during the Dundon administration there was a discussion of combining the two groups, and as I understand it, I wasn't at part of those meetings, but as I understand it, the feeling was the charges of the two bodies were so different that it really didn't make sense to combine them. We're not talking about that now, but we're getting into discussion of how many people on these new boards. I'd just like to reel it in a little bit. I've made the statement before, and I don't think it's controversial at all, that municipalities have personalities just like people, and I think the village has a distinct personality in some ways from the town. As it was originally described to me, the village at that time, the village board created this environmental policy commission, quote unquote, from a board member at the time, to force us to do our jobs, to come up with recommendations, suggestions that were maybe outside the box, maybe controversial, maybe further than a politician would ordinarily go, and to push the village board in those environmental areas. The plan, which has not yet been realized for that body, was once we have a GIS system in place, the Village Environmental Policy Commission is now charged with attending planning board meetings and reporting back to the board if there's anything that concerns them. But once we have a GIS capability, that commission can become a board and can have that formal responsibility, such as the town's board. That's been the vision all along. There's nothing I've heard that I'm fervently opposed to in what's being discussed, but I really think we need to respect our volunteers and involve them in the process early before we start deciding their future. So, sounds good so far, but let's,
I guess
let's talk about
my
some more.
impression is this was just the opening discussion, and the next step would be to, are the town boards and village boards willing to even discuss this? And if they are, then we move on to bringing in everyone else to discuss it.
I think a larger philosophical, sorry.
I just want to second what Don was saying. I spoke with a different member of the village's Environmental Policy Commission who had a great number of misconceptions about what's being proposed, was very distressed about it, and the volunteers that we have in the village and the town, they're not easy to get to, to come by, it's not easy to fill our boards. So the idea of working together to have a better population and draw the best candidates is great, But I do think that we need to include them at the beginning of the process because the misconceptions are creating stress and we need to cherish our volunteers, not put them through the ringer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought this was to kind of get the ideas out there so there aren't misconceptions, right? That's, I think, as we're all in the same room, we can all get all the info out, right? So that's, I think.
Absolutely, I just don't think that we did that because our members are getting distressed with misconceptions, so.
Well, I think the larger conceptual question, and you know, I hope I'm not using a dirty word, is are we as bodies, are we in favor of consolidation of our commissions and boards? That's the part of this you know, that's inherent in this discussion, and I think that should be overt in this discussion. Is that something, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I think that's a large conceptual issue. Do we want to try to combine boards and commissions between the village and the town and consolidate them? It may be that we do, it may be that we don't, but I think before we start doing it, we should at least acknowledge that that's a question. You know?
So I think that's a very fair question, and I think it goes back to, you know, personally for me, I think having the biggest available pool to select the best candidates, you know, with a recruiting background and all about pools and the best candidates. But I do agree with you, it is kind of a philosophical question to address in advance.
So I'm glad we started it.
I think this, you know, it says merger, and that doesn't seem to be exactly what Tim was suggesting. It would be like there would be still two separate boards. You're saying? Do you mind clarifying?
Two separate boards with very clear mandates.
And would people
I think
would people possibly? Would you mix town and village board members? You know, would you change? What if a person in the village possibly be now involved in advising the planning board of the town? Is that?
So if you live in the town, outside the village, or in the village, you could serve on either one of these boards.
So you've got the two different boards. Oh, you could serve on either one of those boards. What about the current pool, though? The current people? Would
They could serve on either one or both
So they
boards.
might want to mix up, you're saying?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Tim,
Okay.
the question is, could a town resident be advising the village? And is that maybe that's okay?
It's more, I was really talking about how would the current members configure themselves? Would there be movement
absolutely.
potentially?
I don't think it's especially useful to say, you know, should we be considering consolidating all boards? I think we're looking at two boards where it would potentially make sense to have more clearly defined mandates for each of them, and then have people from the full town, including the village, being able to serve on either one of the different mandates.
So one big difference would be that the village proposals to the planning board would have would have advisement from the group, whatever group, right? Because currently that's not a mandate that's being.
Right, so if you're on the ENCB now, the ENCB only reviews projects that are before the town planning board.
Right, I do not.
So if you were on this different version of an ENCB, which could have members from the town outside the village or people who reside in the village, you would be looking at land use applications that are before both the village planning board or the town planning board.
Because right now there isn't a mandate that the village.
Right. There was a plan at some point in the future for the EPC to begin doing this kind of work, but it's not happening.
Right. I think that's a positive step anyways, so that's my opinion.
So basically, we're saying that we're going to expand we're saying that we want to expand the EPC to have some say outside of the village, and we want to expand the ENCB to have some say within the village, right?
And additionally, you would be allowing, which you can't currently do, have town outside the village residents serve on the village's EPC. So if someone wanted to look at broader environmental initiatives and they don't want to do ENCB work, which is looking at very narrow land use application reviews, they could go to the village's EPC board or commission.
My concern is, and I say this fondly, I think of the town and village, like the village is kind of like California in its politics. And I wonder if things like the plastic bag ban would have happened if it were townwide. I don't think it would have. I wonder if the ban of national chain stores would happen, which may not have been an environmental, but.
There's no ban of national chain stores.
And so we don't allow, whatever we, in the village, we do not allow, we're not allowing certain types of businesses.
No, that's not.
All right, I'll get the language right in further minutes. We banned some kind of businesses, and that was my understanding of what it was.
No, that would be against the Constitution's
Chain
Commerce
stores
Clause.
Chain stores with more than 20 businesses?
We have reviewed that, but that has never been enacted as law.
Well, the larger point was, I don't think that review would have gotten as far as it did if this was a town-wide effort. I think we're kind of,
It's harder to do radical things when you have a broader constituency, I think what you're saying.
I disagree. I mean,
I think people
like,
who volunteer for those boards too really appreciate that mission, and that you're getting those people who have those similar philosophical beliefs to serve on those boards. I hear what you're saying from a general population standpoint, but I think when we're talking about people who want to serve on those boards, the philosophical aspect of it is pretty similar. Just my opinion.
I actually
But Don, maybe
really disagree with this idea that there are more environmentally minded people who reside in the village versus outside.
I didn't use those words.
I know you didn't, but I'm at best loosely paraphrasing. But I think, look at the Climate Action Committee. Those people, Dan and Ann Gunther, like those are town residents who are, kind of supportive of being mindful of the environment, right? Like
that's putting it mildly. I'll say that's very, very mild.
Maybe in the end, the board could propose whatever they wanted to, but it still has to go to the village and town boards to make those decisions, and maybe that would highlight, problems with it, and within those boards.
Well, I just like my analogy that the village is kind of politically like California. I didn't want to go into anything.
So,
I'm just wondering, and Neil, so we don't keep beating this, and to use a phrase that you used before, Tim, is there's many ways to skin a cat. I'm wondering if there's actually, and as Dennis says too, is volunteers are not easy to come by with heavy meetings, but is it possible we should be forming a village and town commission that is an advisory commission to both planning boards? Because I see, like I said, I see where the zoning has changed, like I said, on the village, so we're going to start seeing the village, parts of the village move out, which is good. We're growing from the core, which is what we want, and seeing heavier development. Some of that is going to be bordering the town, right next to the town. So should maybe be a discussion of forming a different advisory board? And then we don't have to go in and look at changing the structure of the ENCB or the ECC, but maybe there's another advisory board that we could create, or you guys can come up with, and we can say, okay, now, planning board, here's your advisory board that you're gonna go to.
Isn't that what the ENCB already does for the town?
It does, but now it's, again, to your point though, if you're trying to make one that just does it for the village in town, maybe there's a village in town.
Well, I think also to Dennis's point, what I'm fearful of is like, we don't really have people banging down our door saying, can we serve on the EPC?
Right.
And I don't think you guys have residents banging down your door saying, can we serve on the ENCB?
No, I think we're down one.
Actually just got an application.
Yeah, we're down one or two members right now.
We need people on bike ped, and we need another planning board alternate, and, the list goes on, and you guys have the same thing. I'm finding interested and dedicated volunteers
is a challenge.
We can always use more.
At our,
I don't think we should. I think we should make the boards and commissions that we have as efficient as possible.
Okay.
I'm really happy we're having this conversation, and for my conversation with Mike, this is going to be on the agenda for our next ENCB meeting, just for me to report back on this preliminary conversation, just also kind of feel them out. At that point, I'd love to report that back to the board and kind of make the next steps from there. It sounds like the village needs to do that as well, but I think it's
a good start, and I'd like to see where we go from here, not just on this board, but also our other boards, if that makes sense as
EDC
well.
meets on Tuesday next week.
Yeah,
Same
great.
group.
So does the Affordable Housing Commission, and we need people on that as well. It's like,
All right, well, let's move on to the discussion about the fire department use, of office space in the town court building. So it's my understanding that there's some space that we used to use for the courts, the town did, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, that we have not been using for a while. We've been storing some files or things there, but it's been vacant, and the fire department would like to use that space. Is that correct?
yeah, I think the history is that was the space actually used by the police department when they located when they were located in the building, which is now the court building. So there have been unoccupied offices in the ground floor below the court. And I believe the former supervisor, Tony Hoganson, had tried to create an arrangement where the fire department would have access to 2 office spaces in that building. For whatever reason, that agreement did not happen. The fire department did not move in. They're very interested in using those offices, and this would not be just a situation where anyone from the fire department would have access to those offices. It would be primarily for storage and for office use. So Molly Miller, who was part of the fire company, would have access to the space. She would have a key, and the chief of the fire department would have a key. Those would be the only 2 keys. Those would be the only 2 individuals using those offices.
Those keys would be for the doors into the offices as distinguished from the door in the middle of the hall?
They would probably also have a key to get into the building as well, I would imagine.
There actually isn't a key.
There is not that,
There's an outside punch pad, which gives you a security code to get through the first door. And then to get into the offices, there's an ancient door, push button, lock, 4-digit, that you have to push to get into that section. And then past that section is secure PD storage that only the chief has, the PD, that's an actual, right, that's an actual key.
My recollection is that the bathrooms that the clerks use require going through the second locked door with the touchpad that Chris was mentioning. That's why I was asking if the fire department would have a way to lock their 2 offices, but not require locking the hall door, the interior hall door. So still have access as needed to the bathrooms.
How long have these offices been vacant?
Since the police moved out.
Which was 2008, 9? Anyone? All right, roughly there.
Some were used, though. Some, the courts moved down into some of them. I think the village, Tim, I think the parking violations went down and took some, are using some? Or that was former police space?
So what was the decade?
Not anymore.
Just the courts then, took that one office up front.
So,
Where the dispatch.
Yeah, they took the dispatch. Yeah, so I think the dispatch piece was reused by.
you know what the village does do is there's some space underneath the stairwell, and there's some village files stuffed under there.
That was never police though, right? That was the old.
No, that's where we store the salt.
Do we know, perhaps, Chris, if there are any issues with the police allowing that proximity to their locked files?
I don't believe so. I mean, I've really been part of the whole thing, little bits and pieces. I believe Becky from the courts did raise a security issue, of people in and out. We clean the buildings and grounds cleans the building, so we have, my crew has access to the secure room, all except for the PD room, the bathroom, the boiler room is in there, so we can make it in here for service. But I believe she did raise a question on security, about getting in. I mean, that could be as simple as we just change, the codes. Everyone uses my security code to get in. I'm sure that could be addressed.
But I also believe the last time I spoke to the chief, who was also the buildings and grounds foreman, that he didn't seem interested in this anymore. Now, has anyone had any conversation with him recently or excuse me, anyone in the fire department? Now, this might have been, I caught the chief on a bad day or something, but it's, my last impression was, I don't want anything to do with it. It might be worth reaching out to the chief.
I've spoken with the chief, and I've spoken with Assistant Chief Corey Worthman. They're definitely interested in the space, and they need the space. They need the additional secure storage.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
He asked me a while ago, and this is, of course, I didn't have the authority to give it to him. Quite honestly, I was trying to extort a truck out of him. We worked out something for the building, and we just never got to that phase. But I think they've even done work in those buildings as far as painting.
Yeah, they did start painting it several months ago when they thought that it was based on the arrangement that they thought existed with former Supervisor Hokanson. So they did put a coat of paint on one of the
And I wouldn't have an issue
offices.
on keeping, we're in the building anyway, cleaning that section, so I wouldn't have an issue picking up 2 more offices. You know, as far as our cleaning duties.
The last time I was there, they'd actually gone as far as moving furniture in.
Yeah, you know, I walked in everywhere moving
Months
the
ago.
files, and it looks like the rooms were all kind of a mismatch, you know, probably furniture. I don't know what it looked like.
What I'd like to see us do, and this is just my opinion, assuming that we can, and I think we should be able to deal with those security concerns, being that the fire department has put some effort in this, there was at least a belief that they already occupied these offices, and the fact that they are volunteer firemen who do our community a tremendous service. I'd like to see us try to find an arrangement where we can allow them to officially use those offices. That's just my standpoint as an individual town board member. I'm not sure where other people stand
Took
on
the words
that.
right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
We have dedicated, beloved volunteers who run into burning buildings to help our community. They've already made improvements on the space. The space has been vacant for years. It's right next door to what they need. They don't have enough space, and I'm not understanding why this is hard.
This is why we're having the discussion, because
Good.
I agree with Dan, I agree with you, and I want to make sure everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah, the only thing I would ask is someone to reach out to Becky or someone in the courts, what is their concern?
So maybe, assuming that people are okay with what's been described by the few people who have spoken at this point, is that the mayor and the supervisor should speak with the police chief, speak with the courts, find an arrangement that works for everyone, and then bring that proposal back to the board so we can make that an official thing, so we don't have that issue like there was with the previous administration, unless someone thinks otherwise at this point.
Sounds great. And as far as our, we'll help them with setup and stuff like that. It's our slow time of the year. So that'd be good.
My understanding, and I agree, we should double check with Becky, the Justice Court clerk, was security in that this would not be a situation where there's a parade of individuals going in and out of these offices. It's primarily for storage, it's primarily for office space for Molly Miller and for the fire chiefs. That's really all it's for.
I think they thought of, the membership coming in and out, that can get a little hairy on Fortnite.
Yeah, they do that upstairs in they have access to their main fire department space. So this would be for a different type of use.
Be a nice way to say thank you to our volunteers.
It's the least thing we can do.
Great. So, Tim and I will work that out.
Well, do you guys need to make a motion to agree as a board that you're going ahead and offering this space to the firemen contingent on us making sure it's secure and making sure that the Justice Court doesn't have any other issues?
We have another meeting on next Thursday. Could we gather whatever data we have to confirm there are no issues and then put it before us on next Thursday?
Sure. I mean, I don't think we need a formal motion. It sounds like you guys are committed to do that work. Then we can bring it back to the individual boards and act from there. Sounds good. Okay.
So the tree city designation, this is, we got a letter from, I think the town and the village have gotten letters from the DEC. And I think this is just reminding both boards that we need to reapply to be Tree City, Tree Cities USA. And then the next thing is this joint proposal for the tree inventory grant. That's, I'll take off my supervisor hat for a moment, put on my Shade Tree Commission member hat here. And so this is kind of what I've been working on for a couple of years as a member of the Village Shade Tree Commission. And we were originally going to apply as a village commission, but we were strongly encouraged by the DEC to make this more of a village town application. And it's not just, I guess they want more cooperation between villages and towns, and they also don't want the village to have one plan and the town to have another. So we need resolutions from both boards, the village board and the town board, saying that they support the idea of the Shade Tree Commission applying for this grant from the DEC. It helps with the points, right, that you have support. And so, we're asking the village board to consider passing one of these resolutions at one of their next few meetings, and we're going to try to pass one on the town board. And so, to give people background, this inventory will it's completely paid for by the DEC, and it allows you to add all the trees that are within 20 feet of the road, which is what the village has access or control over with the Shade Tree Commission. And I think it's within, I forget the exact distance for the town, but they wouldn't inventory all of the trees in the town, mostly the trees that are in the denser part of the town near the village. And so you would then, this would all be on a GIS, if you get the GIS, and you'd be able to pull up, how many oak trees, how many ash trees, where are the ash trees, where are the oak trees, et cetera, which would allow you to get an understanding of what your potential risks are for invasive species. But it would also let you get an idea of, well, what's the age of the trees in different areas of town. It lets you plan for future shade tree plantings just by knowing what your tree canopy is going to look like over time. It also gives you some rough estimates for the value that your trees are providing for stormwater, which will help us with our MS4 permits, also air pollution and things like that. And right now we have an inventory in the village that's old and out of date. With this new inventory, that's the first step in then making a long-term plan for what you want the trees to look like, over the next, 25, 50, or 100 years. It lets you kind of lay out a vision for the future and not just be reactive to, every time a tree gets sick and it dies and you have to cut it down, but it lets you plan long-term planning and kind of whole system planning, and that's, hopefully we can get one of these grants. But we need resolutions from the boards for that.
Yeah, at the Shade Tree Commission meeting earlier this evening, it was discussed that the Shade Tree Commission has a small budget every year to plant trees. It'd be nice to know where we need the trees. And, so that sounds great.
We could probably just do this with a board motion, right? We can, I would like to just move this forward and make a motion that our village board is supportive of the idea of the Village Shade Tree Commission pursuing this DEC opportunity and looking at trees across the full town, including the village.
I can't imagine that would be controversial, so be comfortable making that motion. Or did you just make the motion?
Yeah, I made the motion. Did you just second it?
I did.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So we are a Tree City now, right?
I think so. But we need to reapply.
Because the letter does say that
Is that
it,
the $25 fee for renewal of membership?
for some of you,
We
it's
have to make a motion to
an invitation to
spend
join.
$25, I think.
Okay.
Is that kind of right, Dan?
Can you confirm we're a Tree City? Can you confirm that we are already Tree City?
I suspect we'll all vote for it, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's, how about we make a motion to pay a fee up to $25 to renew our Tree City USA application.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
If I could just add one quick thing, it would be nice to add this to the, this can be worked into the comprehensive plan. Part of it is we're looking into, at least a partial natural resources inventory. So it'd be nice that if the DEC does this work, then that's certainly a step
All right.
in that direction. Thanks.
So
Neil,
motion
Neil,
carried.
right, your motion carried, so do you think we need to, do we have the same application renewal form on our desk back at Village Hall to become a Tree City for the new
I
year?
think you might, yeah.
Right, so I'd like to make the same motion that we move forward with completing the renewal of that Tree City application for the village.
I'll second that.
I'm hesitant to do too much without Tom and Rebecca here, but given that this is such a no-brainer, I'm okay with it, and especially given that Tom has some fantastic trees on his property, and he will tell you all about them. So I'm okay with this, and I'm ready to buy.
Okay.
Do we want to move on the resolution as well? It's in the packet.
Sure.
I don't know if anyone-
So there's also an official resolution that we would include in the grant proposal. And it just says, whereas the Town of New Paltz Environmental Conservation Board is applying to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for a project grant under the Urban and Community Forestry Program to be located in the Town of New Paltz, a site located within the territorial jurisdiction of this board, and whereas, as a requirement of these programs, said Environmental Conservation Board must obtain the approval endorsement of the governing body of the municipality in which this project will be located. Now therefore, be it resolved that the New Paltz Town Board hereby does approve and endorse the application of the Environmental Conservation Board for a grant under the Urban Community Forest Program for a project known as the New Paltz Tree Inventory and located within this community.
Is that a motion?
I put forward a motion that we adopt this resolution.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed. Great. All right, now to less controversial things.
Well, do we need to do that same resolution?
I sent one to you guys, and,
Do you
but
wanna-
there's no rush. We could
So we
wait.
can do it next week.
You can wait to do that. I've sent that to, I can send it to your clerk, Ryan, and include it in your next package if you'd like.
Did you send it today?
Yeah,
Or you will?
it's too late. I sent it too late for today's
Yep.
meeting. So I wasn't hoping that we would pass resolutions. I was just hoping to have a discussion about this, to
Sure.
let you guys know that this is something that we wanted to. And then the grant isn't due for more than a month, right? So I wanted to get it on the radar so no one's surprised by anything at the last minute. So now, the next discussion is, when I was campaigning, several people asked me about, the possibility of opening the Moriello pool playground up to the public when the pool is not open. And so I wanted to have a discussion with the two different boards about, is that possible? And if so, could we do that? I mean, right now, it's my understanding is that was kind of paid for and it was open, but it's since been closed, and there are a lot of kids that live nearby, and they would like to have access to that when the pool is not open from, say, September through May, and could we make that happen? And so I wanted to talk to the boards about that.
What, I mean, it's not manned, there's no employee costs, right? I guess.
No, but the gate's locked.
I would just ask, Chris, is it a maintenance issue?
This has been something, and I'll ask, this has been brought up multiple times, and so we really should have Bill Russell here too, and it actually is a large maintenance issue. There's many higher quality parks for children to play at other locations that are maintained throughout the year. The biggest problem has been is when we did try this once, and I forget how many years ago, it might have even predated Chris, we tried it, very high rate of vandalism. Both to the playground, everything from the playground having empty bottles left, broken bottles, and vandalism to the actual pool structure. And it involved the neighbors calling the police more frequently than not. That was one of the big issues. The other is also, and Chris will let you know about this, is by the end of the season, the mulch we use there and all that is kind of, lack of a better term, worn out. And there are requirements to the depth of the mulch, how much you have there, and we don't have that up to playground code at this time. We'll order.
Now we do.
But now.
We replaced it last year.
So.
There is an employee cost, because during the dusk, at night when it's pitch dark, you'd have to close the gates up again. At that point, the only one out you know, working is usually me. Union problems make it so I'm not supposed to be doing that, you know, I don't have an issue with it, but, you know.
I would just compare this to the playground at Hasbrook Park, though. That has dawn to dusk rules, and there's no gate.
The problem is it's right next to a large body of water.
Well, we found,
I mean, it's just something to consider. You know, someone hops the gate, there's no one there watching.
But what we're discussing here is that the possibility of keeping the playground open during the months that the pool is closed.
No, I agree with that.
So you don't have that, that conflict. But the pool is covered during those months.
But if people are going to climb over the fence,
they could do that today.
They could do that now.
and we get very minimal. What happened is that we did try, and we should have this discussion again with Bill Russell here, and he can actually give the details on it, but my memory is, I do remember, and we had the chief in on the discussion too, is that the vandalism increased with it being open. Even trying to close it at night was difficult. The police don't have the ability to be responsible to close it if you open and close it.
But why would it be at more risk of vandalism than the playground at Hasbrook Park?
I think it's a little more remote. It's a little more remote.
It's much more remote down there. The neighbors have their windows closed. They didn't hear things, so they heard windows being broken. We had windows broken. We ended up doing a lot of damage to pieces in our pump house because we keep some lights in there for just enough heat to stop freezing. We had some pretty severe damage down there. It was very costly.
And that was because the gate was, I mean, couldn't those vandals jump the gate now? I mean, it's more, if you're a vandal, it's more fun to jump gate than walking through an open gate.
Yeah, Bill can give us the history on this, but I mean, I'm willing to keep talking about it, but the biggest issue always came with, it increased our vandalism rate, unfortunately.
I think we also had some handicap issues that have to be dealt with too. The access through the gate that's there now, it's a larger gate for vehicles, that's where we bring the mulch in through. I don't believe the slope there is correct for a handicap. You know, it doesn't meet the requirement for a hard surface, so that would more than likely have to be reworked. I know we've discussed handicapped issues with coming in through the pavilion area to make it into the two, lack of a better term, play beds, you know, the areas with mulch, on how to deal with that, which we haven't done yet either. But you know, if that's, not that it couldn't be fixed, I mean, now if that's gonna happen, that it'd be a great time to.
If you were to
address
fix it,
there.
how would you fix that? What would you have to do?
We'd have to regrade, and then blacktop or put in a, you know, some semi-hard surface. The only problem is that's a shale knob right there. So it's not as easy just bringing in a backhoe and digging, you know, I don't think we'd have to blast, but, you know, we're gonna have to, it's not a quickie. Or, you know, I bring Stacy, the building inspector, out there and get a better idea of where the slope, you know, we can get pretty creative if, you know, we have to.
You lost me. Is this something peculiar or particular to winter months? Or is that something that's all year round?
No, it's been all year round.
So
But
that's not-
usually you could get through the pool area, which is handicap accessible.
So
It's
then
more
we'll-
one level. Then you go down a slight slope into the pavilion area, you know, which meets ADA, and then into the playground area. With the pool all shut, you can't go through the pool area. Now you're going down that hill we built, or the road we built to the top parking area, and that doesn't create the, you know, and then the top parking lot, there was an old road that went from there into that gated area. You know, it just had to be reworked. You know, I'm sure it can be done, you know, maybe it's a great time to do it.
So I'll talk to Bill, but we can keep talking about it.
Now, my one point I just wanted to make is I think the proximity of the apartment complex near that site, you know, rather than saying there's other places they can go, if there's a walking playground next to a large population of children, you know, I think that's compelling.
Especially if we want
I
to be
agree.
a walkable community. The one question that I would be concerned with is being open year-round, is that going to change our insurance costs? That's something that we need to look into as well.
We should also look into getting the playground certified.
Yeah, should get certified.
I went to sign up to school to go for, to get certified for that, and I might as well go into a 4-year college. I mean, it's very intense, but you can get people
which we looked into doing that, and it just didn't. And all they do is they come by, they check the bolts, make sure things are right.
Do you have
there's an old
any-
baby rock climbing wall that's there that has to be.
Do you have any idea if our Hasbrook Park playground is certified?
I have no idea. But it's something, when we started looking into, being certified to be at the pool, running, going through through the insurance companies, this is
What-
something that came up.
Who is the agency that does the certification of playgrounds? Do you have any idea of the name?
I'm sure I have it. I Googled it, and I got a name of a person who used to do it, and they put me on to a service. I mean, it wasn't astronomical. It was, I believe, a couple $100.
And then the other issue would be looking into who would want to be responsible for opening and closing of the park. Our building and ground crew is done at 3:30.
Yeah, well, their hours change in the summer. We start earlier to beat the
Well, it's
heat.
open in
We're
the
done at
summer.
2:30.
Well, it's open in the summer though by the pool staff.
Yeah,
It
so then
would be
you're
the
there.
winter, the fall and winter
Then it's
months.
3:30.
They're done at 3:30, so it would have a labor cost associated with it to open it and then the.
That's if you're locking the gate.
That's what I was gonna say, if you're locking the gate.
And again, I can say, if we don't lock the gate, we'll get back to torn up swings and vandalism.
But we
I mean,
might or we might not, that's my opinion.
Demographics have changed.
Yeah.
Crime is down.
It's just hard to think of, past history, how long ago was this? I just think
Couple
we
years
should,
ago,
people
just a
should be given a
handful of years
chance,
ago,
I don't know.
Well, I live across the street from Hasbrook Park, and it is such a heavily used playground all day long, all temperature, every temperature imaginable. But then what's also fascinating is the kids are not supposed to be in there. So at night, it shifts from young kids to teenagers, and the teenagers hang out in Hasbrook Park because when I'm walking home, I hear them in there, and and there's not regular vandalism, Not that I'm saying that we're allowing them to be in there because we hear them, but they're in there. They're in the park.
Well, it'd be a good chance to update our infrastructure for the park, and then maybe you try it. If it works, then it works. If it becomes a big problem, then there's always the gate. You lock
You
it
get a
up.
metal sign that says area under video surveillance for about $20.
All right, so let's, it's almost 9 and I don't want to be here all night. So Dennis, can we get your?
Yes. I really just want to plant the seed for our next meeting, when we have both boards and people would have time to research independently, and I would like to get some information out to the public so they have a chance to research independently before our next meeting. But basically, the concept of the municipal garbage district is we would create a municipal garbage district, and rather than creating a municipal system to collect garbage, we would go out to contract with professional refuse collectors to do that for us. And the advantages would basically be that we could potentially save our residents money. This is a system that would be directly billed, so it wouldn't be through taxes. And this is a system that would be voluntary, so if anybody currently brings their garbage to the dump or does something else with it, they're not forced into any expense. And so that's where it is now. So I will forward everyone amongst both boards all the information that I have in the next day or so. And then hopefully at our next joint meeting, which I don't believe we have scheduled yet, we can review it together as boards, and maybe we can get the information out on the town website. That way our residents can also review it. We'll try to get it into a easy to read and digest format for everybody. And then we can go from there. But like I said, I really just wanted to plant the seed, and we can come back to it at a later date when everyone's thoroughly educated. I'm not looking to push anyone into anything, especially not when two of the members of our board are not here.
Thanks for the update.
Another advantage is you would have one company's trash trucks coming up down the streets rather than 4 on one day or 2 days.
Right, so the wear and the tear on the roads would be less, and the noise pollution, the physical pollution, all reduced. And then we would also have a little bit more control over the refuse collectors as well when they're doing a bad job and leaving garbage in the street or anything like that. So that's where I'm at. If anybody has any questions, either from boards or from any members of the community watching at home, please reach out to me. All my contact information is on the village website.
Dennis, I'm very supportive of this concept.
I am too.
Thanks.
You're here.
So Anyone like to add anything else before we adjourn the meeting?
Actually, I would, and I apologize because it may not be appropriate.
Give Marty the mic.
Thank you, Tim. Actually, I would, and it may not be appropriate because I didn't bring it up earlier. Setting the next public information meeting regarding the municipal center. I'd like to see us pick a date.
You want to do that with, and also for a joint meeting too, or have the info session before?
Well, that's a fair question, Tim. In my opening remarks, I suggested that at that information session, we should be prepared to chat about the economics to the taxpayers. So it depends when we would be ready to present that information as a guide to when we would hold that meeting. So part of my suggestion is let's pick a date when we're going to know when we'll have the financial information so that we can reasonably pick a date for the information session.
As far as working together as respective boards going forward, do we want to meet regularly or only when we have something to bring? March 17th. Right, I mean, should we be meeting together once a month to try and foster collaboration every other month? I mean, what is...
We I think, had this conversation with the previous board, and at one point, the last board, we had been meeting every month, and then we kind of fell out of that rhythm, and I think that we, if I recall correctly, decided we kind of wanted to do every other month, unless, of course, something came up that required us to act. So we kind of have a loose schedule now. We did have a rigid schedule, and that was not working, and this is kind of the new format.
So is everybody comfortable with every other month? Do we want to wait until we have the full board to have the discussion?
I like kind of at a minimum once a quarter, but then as needed. And I feel like because we have the Muni Center to be discussed, I think we could easily schedule something for the middle of March. Or wait a minute, did I just say that? I think I meant the middle of February.
February?
Mm-hmm.
So like we have February 17th, that's a Wednesday.
Yeah, we hosted this one if you guys want to.
This is an away game for you.
Yeah.
You're the home team next time.
Expect you to have snacks.
February 17th?
I'm thinking walk off. All right, with the whole team, cool.
So
we
do
have-
want
I'm
to
comfortable doing February 17th at
So it'll be
Village Hall
before your
at 7
meeting.
PM.
That sounds good to me. Put that in.
And we'll have a meeting the
Is that
day.
an issue with anyone?
Would we be switching our meeting, because we would be having a meeting otherwise the day
I don't-
after?
I don't know if we necessarily need a joint meeting at this point, but we can just schedule the info session. Or is your expectation we'll have a joint meeting as well?
Would that be suggesting that we would not be presenting anything further to the public for another month?
Well, I think it depends on, like you said, what we have to offer the public.
I think Fran summed it up very well, you know, that it's one thing to have them, it's another thing to kind of have action items that we're looking at. And although we have a general idea of what we're looking at, I don't think that we really know at this moment what we're going to have.
Do we want to schedule a tentative meeting for February or later in the month of February, and then make it a community center outreach before the meeting if needed, if we find we have information? Do we want to schedule a meeting for March?
We may get more public engagement if we have a regularly scheduled public meeting, so everyone knows that at the third, every third meeting or something is a public meeting for the Muni Center, right? So, and also the earlier we schedule it, the more participation we're going to get, because we'll be in the paper next week. So we scheduled a public outreach meeting, February 17th, you said that would be good.
Well, that'll be good if we have numbers by then.
Or we get more feedback from the public. It's less us telling the public, it's more the public telling us. We can can't err on the wrong if we take that approach.
At the moment, the process has been creeping forward, but we are going to come to a point in time where it might be prudent for us to ask, when do we stop paying the architect? Because at the moment, only the town is paying for all of these costs, until we have assured ourselves that indeed we have agreed on all of the we've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's and can now say at our next meeting on such and such a date, we're going to approve everything. But to get to that point, there needs to be more than one public information session. How long are we content to not push this project forward aggressively? Because the longer it takes us to do this, the more expensive it is for taxpayers.
My impression is we pay him to do certain things like changing plans, but if we're not asking him to do anything, we're not paying him. We're not paying him a daily salary, is that right?
We have agreed in our contract to pay him $50,000 to take this project through the phase called schematic design. And at the end of that schematic design phase, his deliverables are a program that would be similar to what Rick Alfondri had done in 2010 for the town, to deliver schematic design drawings, which for the floor plans might not be appreciably different than what we have already seen and I put up on the wall that kept falling down, plus a site plan, plus some preliminary elevations, plus a preliminary cost estimate. But sequentially, he's got to have some sense of what the outside is going to be before he can get the cost estimate finished. Is it going to be granite, or is it going to be drivit, or something else other than either of those, obviously. So it's just, what would we like our timeline to be? How long is the town board content to be the only ones funding this effort?
Well, do we have things that we're going to ask the architect to do in the next couple of weeks?
That's part of the question, rather than me saying what we are going to do, to ask what is it that we want to do.
Well, I think the exec committee still needs to, we need to digest the new floor plan, some of the costs associated, whether we're moving forward with an LDC or not. Like, those things are still being discussed by the exec committee, who will report back to the boards.
I mean, I look at it at this point is that we're going to have to do a good amount of work as an executive committee. I don't see an issue with us scheduling the February 17th date now. That seems far enough away, unless my village colleagues feel otherwise.
I'm not leaving town, I'm ready to meet.
Okay, so I haven't heard any objections.
So as a joint meeting or as a info session?
I think right now, why don't we do an info session? If we feel there's a need that the boards will have to act, we'll schedule a joint meeting.
And what is our goal to present to be ready to present to the public on the website sufficiently before that meeting, that everybody has a chance to see it?
Yeah.
What is it we want to have prepared sufficiently by that point in time?
I mean, I think that we've indicated today that the financials are a large aspect of that, potentially what the executive committee comes up with in the next 4 weeks before then as well. It could be something that we have a better idea of that we'll discuss. Some of the concerns that we heard today that we haven't yet addressed, we'll look at that, and whatever we hear in the meantime, and whatever comes up in the meantime relative to this project as well.
And what are we asking the architect to do between now and 3 weeks from now?
Nothing. I mean, that's
nothing
also,
until he gets direction.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we're going to have to really meet as an executive committee to continue to move the project forward.
How do we go about affecting an executive committee meeting?
I mean, the executive committee will schedule a meeting. We've been very good at being able to meet. We've met on a number of weekends. We've done that. I don't see any reason why offline we can't start that dialogue. I don't think we have to take everyone's time up now to do that, but we've been very good about meeting when we've needed to.
I'm sure we can meet at some point during the next 7 days.
Yeah.
8 days.
I have no issue with that.
Figure it out.
So with that being said, I guess we should just do this through a motion. So I'd like to make a motion that the town will partake in an info session on February 17th you guys meet at 7?
Yes.
So we want to do it at 6 o'clock at Village Hall.
Let's do it on the 24th then. We change the date to,
Okay, so I'd like to amend.
You want to start at 7 o'clock on the week before? Start our meeting, light agenda for our meeting.
on the 10th?
The original date, you can't make the 17th though.
No, I can.
Well, I thought starting at 6 o'clock was a problem, so.
But the 17th is not it's not a village board date. That is.
I mean, I'd rather not have it the 17th. I got a Board of Education meeting in the Walpole River Association.
Dennis, if you're late for the info.
Wednesdays are hard for you, right?
Info you're already.
If they're just,
It's for the public, right?
I talked to Maria about it. And I'm going to go get their.
My stepson's birthday, but.
We already set the agenda.
Well, you have a village board meeting anyways.
That's impressive.
24 minutes?
All right, so I'd like to make a motion then for us to conduct an info session on the Municipal Center, February 24th at 6 o'clock. Okay. Do I have a second? Any discussion?
Yes. I wish to reflect that that is over a month away from now.
Yes, it is.
And we have agreed that there need to be multiple public information sessions. This project, if we're going to go forward, the longer it takes us to do this, the more the town taxpayers are paying for continued rent in present spaces, and depending on when we would finally then get to the point of breaking ground, we may or may not also be faced with winter conditions. We had a schedule that under the best of circumstances would let us start construction in the fall of 2017. If we are contemplating not holding our next public information session, and we've identified that there are multiple public information sessions, and we've identified that the architect is on hold, and we've said that before we finish negotiating the legal documents, we're going to look at the economics, my observation is that we should no longer be contemplating breaking ground in 2016, because the delay will not let us get bids out as we had contemplated in June, and therefore back in July, and therefore break ground before the cold weather. But now we have forced ourselves into a position where we won't break ground until spring of 2017. Just that everybody should be aware of the economic consequences that there are to that.
And I agree with that, but I also think that a large part of the reason why we've delayed it is because we've had very important conversations as well. And although I'm very sensitive to delaying the project from a cost standpoint, I'm even more sensitive to us going down a wrong path to meet that timetable.
Which would be more expensive. I think.
I don't believe we need 5 weeks to determine what the economics
So
are.
I proposed a time. You didn't object to that. Do you have another date then that you think is more appropriate?
I did, and I suggested it, and that be before our meeting next Thursday.
That seems to be a little aggressive.
It depends what we want to accomplish. And if all we want to accomplish is to understand the economics of this project, I have internally circulated to our board economic information. I showed it to Tim. Jeff referenced it tonight in his public comments.
So did Josh.
And it's verifying those numbers or correcting them. That doesn't take us 4+ weeks to do.
You know, I'm confident that we will wrap our arms around the economics. We also have decisions with regard to the LDC, how it would work, whether it would work. We have decisions with the community center and whether that would be included in the project, whether to subdivide the land or not subdivide the land. So I think I'd like to be in a position where we're further down the road in many of those issues and are able to hopefully speak to the public about the resolution of those issues or the progress toward resolution of those issues. And I think the date we're talking about gives us time to do that. So I completely respect and understand the frustration. Municipal projects take longer because of some of these reasons. It's just, it's nature of the beast.
I agree with Don.
So the 17th seemed, it's a little closer. Is that, I missed it, what the issue of the 17th was?
It's St. Patrick's
Day.
And
Neil said.
Oh, that would be March, right?
No, yeah,
that's
right.
not- okay. No,
That's
no,
right, no,
we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting that night, so it'd be an extra night for us to be away from our family. We're doing the 24th, that's our regular meeting night, and we maybe can spend the previous.
Well, you have a meeting before the 24th on this 10th, maybe? Well, let's do it on the 10th if you don't want to have an extra night. I just see that we have for months now been exacerbating the timeline, and holding meetings more often will shorten the timeline. Holding them in shorter intervals will shorten the timeline. As to an executive committee meeting, I requested 2 weeks ago by email to have another executive committee meeting. In fact, at our last executive committee meeting, in the meeting, I requested setting a date. And there has not yet been any appetite to set a date. I saw in your emails, Don, today that you mentioned, or yesterday perhaps it was, setting a date.
How about if we would it be okay that we have a meeting on the 10th and present what we have, as much as we have done, and then if we have another meeting if we're not done with everything on the 24th.
I like that approach.
I'd rather just the boards present out whatever the executive committees are sharing with the boards. I mean, why do we need...
Have it presented as the boards, but not a public forum?
As an agenda item during a regular meeting?
Or as a presentation during a regular meeting?
Would that be helpful?
Whatever way we get this information to the public so we can get feedback from the public and become knowledgeable enough among ourselves to know whether this is a project that we want to tell the architect to get off of hold and...
Well, I know that you guys do that as executive committee members. You report back to your board and you make comments at your board meetings to update the board and the public. And Don and I do the same thing with our village board.
This doesn't also preclude us from stopping to work because we've scheduled this date as well. So what I'm hearing, to kind of bring this back, is that there's a commitment from the village board to have an update to the public on the 10th, but we're scheduling and we have continued to update our board on what's going on, but we're scheduling a public information session on the 24th, but all the while leading up to that, we're going to continue to update the public.
Well said.
So with that being said, that seems to meet everyone's point of view here. I have a motion and a second on the table. We've had discussion. Does anyone have anything else to add before we call the question? Does that seem all right, Marty?
No, I think that there's no need to get a month out before it's in steps. We're all doing it in increments.
Sure.
And what I'm hearing tonight is the next incremental step is exclusively focused on economics, and that explicitly excluded is the further negotiation of the documents, which are threshold documents.
I heard that differently. And correct me if I'm wrong, I heard us kind of talking about what Fran told us to do, and that's to talk about what is a specific topic for that forum, right, that we're going to deliver. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stop the work on what you've discussed and what we have to do prior to that date. So I don't see this as delaying the project at all, because we're still going to do the work. It's just when we're presenting that work in a formal setting.
You're not holding up building committee meetings until then. It's just to update the public on wherever we are at that point in time.
We're holding up the date until which a shovel can be put in the ground. And if we take Don's philosophy, well, it's municipal stuff and everything in municipalities takes forever. That's one of the objections that I have to government, is that it unnecessarily takes an exorbitant amount of time, because that costs my constituents tax dollars to do that. So my goal is to move it forward and to get to a point where we can confirm through votes that indeed this is a joint town, village, municipal committee.
I also
are a potential impediment to that.
Yeah, I also disagree with Don. I don't think that we're taking an unnecessarily long amount of time. I think we're working as best we can. It takes time to review documents, to review concepts, and I'm fine with the pace that we're going at.
I think we're taking it necessarily.
Precisely. I was being a little playful when I was saying that I disagree with you, that we're making a mistake. I'm saying that it's frustrating. It's the reality of the type of review that needs to be done.
We're using tax dollars. We have to treat it as such. This isn't
right, and what I'm anticipating is that we end up with a better project that makes more sense for taxpayers by taking our time and reviewing things thoroughly and reviewing everything that we possibly can.
Just the changes in the floor plan alone indicate that we need to step back and take the time to make the decisions that we're making. And I don't feel like anything is being held up by offering a public information session. The committee meetings are what's going to drive everything, not the public info session.
I disagree with that, because we need the info from the public.
I would ask again, where is the building committee supposed to fit into all this? If you're going to talk about changes in plans and presenting plans, and several times David's been the last one to find out about things. He's the chair of the committee, and he's just being nice. I'm not being nice tonight, so that's my concern. Where if you guys go ahead, the executive committee meets on the 24th. We're not even in the picture, which is fine as long as we know where we're supposed to be.
I think the executive committee members have expressed to the town building committee on a few occasions that when we have particular questions, that we would reach out directly to the former town building committee. Yeah, I feel like we've had this discussion at least like 3 or 4 times.
But that's not a former group. He's referring to a former group.
If you're not the former committee with the former committee, then you know.
They're an active group still.
Yeah, the Municipal Space Committee isn't a former committee. I assume that's who you're referring to when you were saying the former committee.
Okay, then I misunderstood. I didn't realize that it was still an active committee. I thought it was an ad hoc committee.
Well, they still exist. They've not been disbanded by any action of our town board.
But is it not ad hoc? I feel like that is what we have discussed on numerous occasions, that it's ad hoc.
That is the conversation that we've had.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So to bring this back, because there's still a motion on the floor and a second, Marty, maybe we're disagreeing on this. I don't see this as slowing down the project because we're going to continue to do the work as an executive committee. It's all about just when we are doing a formal info session to report out the work we're going to do. And whether we did that info session a week from now or 3 weeks from now, it's not going to stop the executive committee from doing that work.
No, it's stopping the architect from doing his work.
But it has to do with just telling the public what we're doing. I mean, because we had that public info session isn't telling the architect what he should do next. That's what the executive committee.
What I have heard tonight was the architect is on hold and to be told that he's on hold. Did I misunderstand something?
Until the executive committee wants things to go forward. We don't want him working when the executive committee may change the direction, right? I mean, and redoing plans and wasting money. We need to be careful with what we spend.
Okay. And just to clarify before I do this, you guys were, again, okay with the 24th date?
I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the village that we schedule a public information session for February 24th?
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
So I'd like to call the question because the motion was made, it was seconded. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, awesome.
Motion to adjourn?
I think...
Before we adjourn, I apologize. I wanted to thank Fran Wishnick for coming out and on her wedding anniversary and wish her and her husband a happy anniversary. And now I'm ready to adjourn. I think that, a prime example of excellent service to us.
That's great.
Wow. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Ken.
All right.
Did you get my message? I'll have something for the town.
So, we're adjourned, right?
Well,
we are.
You're adjourned.
You're adjourned. So now we
can just keep it open.
Meeting that we have to adjourn.
do we need...
They're separate meetings.
We stay open?
Yeah,
Yes, we just stay open because
All right,
we
see you
each open
guys.
separate meetings.
So I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'd like to add something to the agenda.
We're going to do the discussion.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right, so I'd like to... Second. Any discussion?
Yes. I would like to add something to the agenda.
Yes.
It has to do with the Duzine School. They would like to seek permission from the town to have students walk on the town's property. During,
We'll add that.
if this would be appropriate.
Yep, we'll add that to the agenda.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to give a brief update on correspondence I had with Robert Freeman from the Committee on Open Government as well.
Noted. So, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Duly noted, passed. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And that's the ones from 1.
1/12/16?
Yep, special town board meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. We are scratching the parade request. I guess it needs to go to the village first and then back to us, so we will see that for a third time. And so now I'd like a motion for the warrants, prepays, transfer, and budget modifications. That is the second page of your, not the second page, it's after the,
Since Marty and I are the audit committee this week, I will make the motion to approve the amount of $580,340.09.
Seconded?
all in favor?
Aye.
Duly passed. So we have a resolution, I would like a motion to discuss the resolution of the Lent Drainage District.
So moved.
Any discussion?
Yeah, can I just have our, while we have him here, I just want our engineer to look at it real briefly, like we have him here. I don't know, Dave, you hadn't reviewed this yet? This is, so can we just get a quick review while we have Dave here? Do we have to do this one separately? It's not in these ones. To do this separately too? Is there more to it? Yeah, is there more to it? I just,
This is, the only thing, this was from, the attorneys have worked this out, and I think Stacy took a look at this as well. Right, and so this is what was presented to.
we've done drainage easements, the issue is there's usually a map and stuff attached to it, and then there's also the engineering report on it, and who's gonna maintain the drainage, and usually Chris has seen it and signed off.
Just the one on
I don't.
Winfield property?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Moriello called me about that. It just looked like we missed a catch basin that's on the corner of his property into the actual drainage district. We're just adding it. It's something that we already maintain, or it's in the district, so it doesn't pose any more work to the town or liability. It's something-
Is that the one it is?
I think the easement or the drainage catch basin is actually in the right-of-way,
Yes.
but there's some easement behind it to be able to maintain it, basically. So I have seen this last week.
That was for the cross pipe that goes across to the drainage pond.
And so they're trying to sell their house, and the attorneys are working this out, and they asked.
Cleaning it up.
Who's gonna maintain it? Good deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so it just got missed when we took over all the
Yeah,
drainage
it doesn't
easements.
pose anything extra that we're doing. It's part of the district now. We always considered it part. This is just
Making
firming it up.
official. Good deal. Thank you.
So, do I have a motion
I think it was.
to,
I think it was a motion. Did you have a motion?
Which one are you doing, the resolution?
Because, yeah, we have to declare it as an action
It's a
first.
type 2 action, so you can just say it's a type 2, and then there's no more environmental review.
Yeah, I only had that one piece. I was wondering, yeah.
It's administrative,
Okay,
basically.
I didn't get this. There we go, there's the resolution. So this is, all I got was an egg deck.
I don't think I have that other one either.
So here's the,
Looked like it was in our And it was repaired by you and had to fix that clock.
so Dave, we have to do the Lent Drainage District for the easement and the determination, right, of non-significance, because it's type 2. So, this is the one you do first. This is the no significance, and then you do this one, which is, that's the resolution. So first we determine our secra, that it's a type 2 action, negative, there's no impact, and then we make a resolution.
Okay, so can we have a resolution and notice of determination of non-significance?
Yes.
Do I have a motion for that?
So
Sec-
moved.
Second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. So do I have a resolution for the Lent Drainage District to accept the easement that is on the website posted and that the rest of the town board members have in front of them, so we don't have to read the whole thing?
Yeah, you don't need to read that, yeah.
Do I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Second? A motion passed?
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed.
I need that, that's her copy.
right.
Yeah, that's Rosanna's copy. Oh, and can we get the other one? Neil does a single one, perfect. That's Rosanna's. You're welcome.
There we go.
So we have a few other request authorization prepays from Gene that are in the packet. So I'd like to make a motion to request authorization to prepay the Symantec Endpoint Protection License for 38 computers through Alter Enterprises LLC. The cost for 1-year renewal is $636.12.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. I have another, I'd like to make a motion to authorize monthly purchase orders. One to Kevin Barry for $3,750. And we authorized that on January 2nd. We're gonna change that to Robert J. Zecchio for $3,750. Another authorization, monthly purchase order to Modular Space Corporation for $3,460. That needs to change to Modular Space Corporation for $3,460 under a different budget line. The budget line is changing from AAA 522-1620-400 to AAA 522-1620-410.
So moved.
Seconded.
I have one more too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Add A1 Web Presence Provider for $1.50 to budget line DBB 522-5130-400. This is for an email address for the mechanic for pricing and ordering.
So moved.
Now I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. And so, we need to have a resolution for the Waterloo District, Jeff?
The only thing we need to, for the water district?
For the attorneys to talk.
I just need to make we can make a resolution to approve funds for the attorneys to discuss terms of an agreement to work on an easement with representatives of the JAM and Morial lands on South Putt Corners Road.
All reimbursable?
These are actually, the funds for these actually aren't reimbursable. We actually have the funds. These are actually going to come out of the funds that Jay Mawaha gave to the town. He gave $100,000 to the town to create this water loop. About a year ago, he gave us the funds. So we have $100,000. So they actually will be coming out of a fund put aside specifically for the water loop.
Great.
Yeah, I spoke to Jean today, and she confirmed that she does have the funds, and they are in a separate fund.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then just a motion for our engineer to prepare bid specs for work to develop the water connection on South Putt Road through the easement of the JAM and Moriella properties. And again, these would be paid for through that same fund.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And Dave said he'll have those in 2 weeks. I just wanted to say that again, Dave, while you're
You're repeating yourself, Jeff.
on purpose.
And so on the agenda here, there is an item about a discussion of the supervisor's salary.
Yeah, I'll take that. We had a discussion very briefly at our reorganizational meeting about at least myself and Marty having a willingness to see the supervisor's salary restored to the original rate, which the original rate would actually still be $3,000 less than what the previous supervisor made. I'm not necessarily sure if we even want to act on this, but I wanted to, we put it on the agenda, so we let people know about it. We've discussed it at our previous meeting, or 2 meetings ago, and I just kind of wanted to have a discussion as a board if there is a willingness to allow us to go forward and make up that difference. I personally am supportive of it. I know Marty spoke about it, and I just wanted to open that dialogue.
I support it as well.
I will not support it, as you know. I mean, the vote is obviously outvoted. We already have our supervisor of this town at the top of the pay scale for supervisors all through Ulster County, majority of Dutchess County. The rate for which we paid our supervisor escalated tremendously through the Hokanson, for which I voted against it. It then increased again with Supervisor Zimmett, which I also did not vote in favor of. We already are at the top of the market, in some cases even bordering communities to ours, and communities that have very similar budgets and responsibilities are substantially less. The next closest one would be, I believe, is top of my head, $41,000 at the town of Ulster. That is we are well within the market value of this. To come here and expect that we would be paying that, I just think is irresponsible. And if you want to look in and talk about it this next year, I will be glad to talk about it. But this is not what our community needs, is more expenses. And we certainly have always exceeded, and we came in when we first started. I begrudgingly approved, actually I didn't know, I never actually even voted against the stipends to the supervisor, the raise I agreed to, because of the very tremendous amount of time it took, and our budgets decreased tremendously, and we also decreased the tax rate to our community because of the previous administration under Hokanson had made tremendous errors costing taxpayers and our community. Those were rectified, but again, it always has been growing. I have consistently voted against it, so I don't agree at all, but there's obviously already 3 votes here, so you guys do whatever you want.
I mean, just for the record, we're not the top paid supervisor. The town of Woodstock has 52. Town of Ulster is, I think, also higher than the rate that you said. Additionally, what I did was I asked the Association of Towns for a list of all the salaries of supervisors, and it's very much based on the culture of the town. It varies drastically. There are communities our size that pay almost double, and there are communities our size that pay a fifth. I think that we established a culture, we drastically reduced that culture for reasons that were not consistent with the reasons we created the comptroller's position, and I've already detailed that by simply watching the meetings and, contrasting what was said then later at those budget meetings. You are correct, you did vote against the stipend for the supervisor last time, but the board also approved a stipend a year ago for a program that actually didn't exist. So we literally paid our supervisor an additional $3,000 for a job that didn't exist at all. I think it's appropriate to simply put it at a level that doesn't include a job that doesn't exist. We're still going to pay our supervisor less. If we want to attract talent to these positions, we have to pay it at a reasonable rate. Frankly, this isn't even a reasonable rate, and our previous supervisor admitted that at our last meeting when we did approve the budget. But I do think that we should at the very least keep it consistent with what it was. I think it hurts our democratic abilities locally if it's reduced to the way it is. The expectation is that it is a full-time position. And I think that I want to be able to have someone who can do it full-time, and the reality is salary is a part of that. So that's my feelings.
I agree with what a lot of what you said, Dan, especially when you want to attract someone who has, the qualifications that you're looking for. And I do object to how it was done. The reduction of salary was done after Neil, was a candidate. So in good faith, he became a candidate for this position, and he thought the salary would be this, and I think it's unethical to change it. So
Just for correction there, no, it was done long before that. We've been doing budget work. I've been working with our budget. I've been working
But
with-
did he know that, though?
No, we were still doing preliminary
Okay,
budgets within the town.
that's all I'm saying, so he didn't
So
know.
But I take umbrage to your remark that it was unethical, because nothing unethical was done there. It was not being done as an unethical piece. I was also a candidate at the time for it, and my original proposal was less than what was proposed. The town of Ulster, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 41 or 42,000. The town of Lloyd is 29,000 or 31,000. They also have a police department. Town of Ulster, I believe, is 29 or 32,000.
Woodstock's 52.
Woodstock is 52. I'm just naming our neighboring towns that also have police departments. I'm very sorry for them that you guys feel they don't have talented supervisors because of the pay rate. I think that is not a fair assessment, because if you're going to say you're not going to get good talent, then you're saying that they do not have good talent because they're not paying enough, and I think that's also not true at all. I think we're very fortunate we have very good supervisors in our neighboring communities, and the pay scale is as indicated. The big portion of the job and responsibility of a supervisor, and I could take you down to Westchester, Rockland, or Long Island, and I can show you town supervisors that are paid $190,000. I think there's some in Long Island that are even over $200,000 or very close to it. Is the fiscal responsibilities. We now have a comptroller who has taken over all of the fiscal responsibilities of it. We have a person that's doing the budget. That is our budget. She is designated as our budget officer. So that is the biggest carrying portion of the job. But I don't have the votes here, so I'm in no mood to debate this, so I'm more than happy to call the vote.
Well, I have more to add to that as well. Fundamentally, I don't think that you should have to be independently wealthy or retired to hold this type of public office and be able to do it full time. I think that that's a terrible standard to set. I can't say the specific date that this decision was made. I can say that when the town uploaded its budget, it did it in a format that allows you to see exactly when the budget was edited. And funny enough, this was one of the last things that was edited, and anyone can go on the town website and look it up right now. You can see exactly when things were changed. And according to this, it was actually changed September 24th, 2015 at 11:44, which was a few hours before we actually received our budget, where the change was made from $50,000, $786 to the $40,000 mark. Maybe you're telling me that it was done earlier than that, but that's the only indication I have on record of when any change was made. Additionally, when we created the comptroller position, I specifically asked the question about how it would affect the compensation for that position going forward, and at the time it was stated that that would not happen. You sat on the board for that, and there was never a discussion about that happening, but then it kind of happened all of a sudden that time around. So that's even more reason I think that we should make that change.
I'd like to add that my comments have gone back to the date that you just mentioned when I first saw the budget and saw that the amount had been reduced. And I understand compensation theory a little bit. At one point, I ran the wage and salary administration system for the state of Vermont, and I agree that you pay for the position, not for the person. And doing a salary survey is very difficult because of the huge range in salaries of other supervisors who are in a full-time position. Where I come down on it, therefore, is that at $40,000 a year, we're paying a person, in this case our supervisor, $20 an hour approximately. At $50 an hour, we're paying our supervisor or that person in that position $25 an hour. Either of those seems too low. $20 an hour seems excessively low to me.
So what do we make an hour then?
Which one of us?
Anyone.
If you went to you last year and
Even
when you
now,
ran
yeah.
this for us for months, you made about 10 cents an hour.
There you go.
Now you might make $1 an hour.
I don't even consider.
And I suspect right now I'm at about the 10 cents an hour level.
So if you're gonna make an hour
And if
argument,
I'm at 10 cents an hour Neil's probably about the same.
We're doing
It's in
this.
a lot more hours.
We're doing this to serve the public, and that's
Well,
what our responsibility is.
I can get comfortable agreeing with you that we, except I might define we to exclude the supervisor, because all the rest of us are part-time and the supervisor is a full-time position.
Okay. With that, I'm going to make the motion to move $10,786 from line 9060.8, which is the money that was allocated for health insurance to the sum of $20,000, and to put that into a stipend to award to the town supervisor.
Would you repeat the amount again, please, Dan?
And I'll explain how I come to this
Yes.
number. It's $10,786, which would put what was originally put into the last budget we passed at $50,786. That removes the $3,000 stipend that was created, that was given last year anyway. That job actually didn't exist, and we still paid $3,000 for it. So that's why I'm using the number 10,786, because it simply restores that salary.
So if we went back to the 2015 budget line item for supervisor salary, it was $50,786?
Yes, and then there was also an additional stipend.
No, I understand
Yep,
that,
yep.
but the base salary.
That would have
level.
been the base salary.
Mhm. Did you make that as a motion?
I made a motion.
I will second that motion.
The only discussion I would have is, I would suggest changing actually the salary and moving it directly into the salary line and not paying it as a stipend, because amongst other things, I'm also not a big fan of stipends to elected official, and in town hall, we've had issues with them, but if that's the way you want to structure it. And did Jean suggest to structure it as a stipend?
Yeah, she suggested it that way, and then also then what about the safety net stipend? How was that done?
The safety net stipend wasn't, that was actually paid not as a stipend, that was money from the county, and that was actually supposed to be, it wasn't given as a stipend. Your title was, that actually had a real title. It was the title of...
Safety net officer. It was not given by
It
the
was
county.
safety net officer, and it didn't kick in, the safety net didn't kick in, and I can't remember the date exactly. I think it kicked in around...
September 2014.
We were still doing corrections all the way through, I believe, March or April, I can't remember, of 2015. We were still doing corrections on safety net.
According to Ulster County Social Services, we should not have been, the program would have ended September of 2014, which is established through the enabling legislation through Assemblymember Kevin Cahill's office, of which I was a member of the staff when the bill was created. So
I don't.
I think that's
doesn't mean
unlikely
it's not
that was
relative,
the
but-
story. Well, it's very relevant because that position was created and then paid and didn't actually ever exist. And additionally, since the items of who was under the safety net program appeared in our warrants and we signed them, it actually was a violation of how the program was even supposed to be administered. But I think we have a motion and a second on the floor. So I am going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And no.
Thank you. And what did you vote?
I did not vote.
Is that an abstention?
I abstained.
Gee, I wonder why, Neil. I would have done the same.
But now on to more controversial topics. We have a motion to allow the Duzine School permission to...
For discussion.
Discussion.
So, the principal of Duzine would like to just sort of get official permission from the town for the students to walk from their land onto the town's land for nature walks. So, is that,
We gave permission to this like a year or two ago to someone also from Duzine
It was
School.
for the Boy Scouts or something, they did a
Well,
project.
no, the Boy
on a
Scouts,
path,
no, that was
then-
different. That was the Boy Scouts, but then the
Was it the Boy
seniors.
Scout?
No, that was then the...
No, you're right, it was the pig class.
Piglets class.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've done this in the past.
But there ran an issue with that, because I got a phone call from a neighbor saying they just
right.
built on my property.
This is just, this
Well,
wouldn't be
There's some controversy
doing...
over some of the neighbors there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
This
the
is
pig was
simply
built,
letting the
that's been
children
rectified.
have basically a field trip on, in the Millbrook Preserve, basically, on the town's land. I'll also, we're going to be seeking permission from the village too to be on their land, but, so Is that something that?
I don't know if they even need permission, it's
I know.
dedicated land. It's
They're
town
seeking,
land.
they're,
It's
I
park
know,
land. No, it's
I
not
know,
park
but they're
land.
seeking official permission, and
So I make a motion that we allow.
I agree that I didn't know why it was needed, but they're really, the design principle is, I don't even know if the town board needs to vote on this, but I said I would bring it, because the teachers are not able to take kids onto, off of the property, you know?
Might be a liability.
Yeah.
So they have to
Why don't we talk about this, make sure we're all in the clear about it
Sure,
offline, and then we
absolutely.
can settle
It was a
it.
discussion. I was only asking for a
Yeah.
discussion.
No, I think that's great. I'm happy you brought that up.
Yeah.
Right on.
Great.
And then I just
Make a motion to put this on the agenda.
We don't even have to do that. We're good.
And we have an update.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that at our last meeting, we had a disagreement over the interpretation of the open meetings law. And what I said I would do is reach out to Robert Friedman. So what he did was I sent him the video of our meeting, which he reviewed, and he sent me over two things. He sent me over an opinion that he had already established, and then he also referred me to the open meetings law. So this is an opinion from Robert Friedman on executive session. He said, quote, "Unlike an open meeting when comments are conveyed with the public present, an executive session is generally held in order that the public cannot be aware of the details of the deliberative process. When an issue focuses upon a particular individual, the rationale for permitting the holding of an executive session generally involves an intent to protect personal privacy, coupled with an intent to enable the members of a public body to express their opinions freely." Additionally, relevant to that discussion about disclosure of executive session, he showed me a specific piece of law which details why that type of information should not be let out. And for anyone following at home, it's Open Meetings Law, Section 105F. And here are the following things of which can be discussed in executive session and not for public disclosure. It's listed as the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation. I just wanted to give an update since I said I would do that, just to clarify that interpretation of law. Thank you.
If there are no more items.
Well, yeah, discussion, designation of LEPC chair. You skipped over that, and you had asked, well.
That is just, kind of.
Well, I have
update.
it, you asked me to update it, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could work
so
on
good.
it, so if you want to discuss it,
Yes,
and
I
we
would.
could actually even
I don't
vote
wanna
on
put
it.
you on the spot, but if-
No, not at all, you asked me to look into it, so after discussing it with several different people, and then one name that came up that I actually thought would be the most qualified is Lieutenant Lucchese. And so I did speak to the chief first, and then I did speak to Lieutenant Lucchese. He is willing to do it. He actually has all of the NIMS training. He's willing to do it. Another advantage is even, I think we put $1,500 in the budget for it.
Yeah.
Then what we would do is then any of the times and days, because he actually does work a later shift, so times and days that he does go to meetings, then we wouldn't have to pay him back with comp time. So like right now, when he goes to meetings and stuff, because he actually already does work on partially with the LEC, he now would just be going now as the LEPC. He's happy to continue the quarterly meetings. He would then be actually meeting with you for two things. He could be both meeting with the lieutenant and then meet with you. They would do the quarterly roundtable, so I'd like to, I guess, make a motion. And again, the chief did approve it, and also help me here, the lieutenant approved it also. So I'd like to make a motion giving the supervisor the ability to write a letter of agreement with Lieutenant Lucchese, naming him as the LEPC chair for the town of New Paltz.
Second. Sounds great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so again, you can work if you want to call Bill, yeah, if you want to call Bill Wallens, just to have him prepare a letter, just so he knows the duties and it's separate. And they're both very familiar with it.
Great,
So
thank
you
you.
can take that, you're welcome to take it off the list.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Good night, New Paltz.